across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you on this absolutely miserable, rainy, grey Monday morning. I have to say, it was much nicer in the Alps. Blue skies, bloody lovely snow, absolutely lovely. Not quite so chill here, I have to say. Quite a lot of news going on while I was away. Big thanks, as always, to the absolutely superb Alex Phillips, who took over for the week, and an awful lot more to talk about this week as well. Of course, today, crucially, marks the 3rd anniversary of the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine. That, of course, is going to be a key topic and the subject of our question to you today. Who do you trust most on Ukraine? Is it Donald Trump? Is it Volodymyr Zelensky? Or is it Vladimir Putin? I want you to bear in mind, I do think there is a wrong answer among those options. At least one. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so I'll take on all comers. Give us a call on 0344 499 1000. Text the word to talk and then to 87222. Get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1. Standard network rate message. And as always, it is wonderful to have your company, whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device. It's really good to have you on board. So coming up in this hour, we are going to be talking about what Zelensky had to say yesterday. He said he'd be willing to step down as the Ukrainian president in return for peace and NATO membership for his country. I think rather calling Donald Trump's bluff about him being a dictator. There's one dictator in this debate, and he's called Vladimir Putin. The surprise remarks were made ahead of a huge number of foreign leaders, particularly EU leaders, travelling to Kyiv today for events to mark that 3rd year anniversary. Also, big events in Germany yesterday as the German's conservative CDU party won the country's elections, with the party's leader, Friedrich Merz, set to become Germany's next chancellor in a coalition with the defeated left-wing SPD. Because that's what happens when you have PR. You basically just get the same government in different variations along the way. Meanwhile, they've all refused to work with the far-right AfD, Alternative for Deutschland party, who doubled their vote to just over 20%. We'll be talking about that and the implications for Reform UK, who are not, of course, a far-right party, but the implications for British politics from what we can learn from that. Also, official figures show that fewer welfare claimants are having their benefits cut and sanctioned after refusing to take jobs, despite Labour's pledge to crack down on worklessness. I know, we're all surprised, aren't we? And just 1 in 6 energy bosses think the world can achieve net zero by 2050. That's down from nearly half of executives who were asked the same question last year. Also, 1 in 6 energy bosses is lying because we can't afford it. It's not achievable. It won't happen. But, you know, facts. Anyway, all that is coming up here at Talk, the home of common sense. And I'm delighted to say, as is regularly the case on a Monday, commentator Sam Armstrong joins us for the show. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Looking very bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, if you don't mind me saying.
Well, not as good as you with your post-ski tan.
It's just all out of a bottle.
All out of a
it's
bottle.
all out of a bottle.
All out of a bottle.
I
can see where the goggles were, though. Definite, you know, definite ski tan there.
Yeah. Can you see the sprain and the whiplash from the fall? But there we are. I always fall down the mountain at some point. It's part of the fun. Husbands, they make you do these things. What can I say? Anyway, more importantly, very, very significant day today. 3rd anniversary of the Russian invasion. Now, Vladimir Putin didn't expect at any point that he was actually going to get to even a 1st anniversary of that invasion. He expected Kyiv would fall immediately. Zelensky, as he would do, will get on a plane and disappear off with a few billion in Ukrainian currency and never be seen again. That's not what happened. In terms of the question we're putting today to our audience, who do you trust most on Ukraine? Donald Trump, Volodymyr Zelensky or Vladimir Putin? What's your answer to that?
Well, undoubtedly, the wrong answer is Vladimir Putin. This is a man who, remember when he invaded, he refused to call it a war. You could be arrested in Russia for describing it as a war. This was a very limited police action. They thought they would take Kyiv, the capital, as you say, in days. In actual fact, what this shows and what this proves, and say what you like about Volodymyr Zelensky, he has demonstrated an indefatigability that exceeds anything that anyone can remember. He has held on tooth and nail. He governed that country in a wartime situation from the bunkers. He was every bit like Winston Churchill in the Second World War, and he has at least to an extent, prevailed, and good for him. And I think that also
most of his country is still ruled by Ukraine, not by Russia. That, that's victory of sorts.
Exactly right. And I think what that demonstrates is it puts the lie to what Vladimir Putin claims. He claims, and what Donald Trump has claimed, that Zelensky is a dictator, that there is no support for him or this war. Well, look, I can tell you how you can measure the support for the Ukrainian cause. You can measure it in blood. You can measure it in the constant determination, fighting spirit, the daily just getting on with it that has characterised the Ukrainian people over the past 3 years in circumstances that would make anybody in this country run a million miles the other way, I'm afraid to say.
I hope not all of us.
But they have stuck in, they have dug in and fought in bitter cold, horrible mud, all of the rest of it, as they've seen their loved ones die and be repeatedly maimed. So who do I trust? Well, I do trust the leader that has steered his country through the darkest hour that any of us could possibly imagine in a nation's history.
And that is Zelensky. But this is the key thing, isn't it? It's very funny that Donald Trump said, he really admires strong men. He's a big strong. I like a strong man leader. But who Zelensky epitomises that of someone who's stood firm, who's led his country. He's not perfect. Yeah, his name came up in the Panama Papers, and no one. I've never deified this guy. I'm sure, like pretty much. I mean, he campaigned in 2019. By the way, when he was democratically elected, it wasn't the result of a coup. He was democratically elected. He campaigned anti-corruption. This is a country that is just, like all ex-Soviet bloc countries, is just absolutely mired in corruption. It is the normal way of doing things at every level. Doesn't make it right, but that's what's like. You often, you haven't got an angel or a devil to choose between. You're choosing between the least worst. I think he's by far the least worst. What did you make of what he had to say yesterday? Because we've got all these events going on and everyone's getting their pictures. And in fact, he's meeting up with Ursula von der Leyen. Well, again, she's not an elected leader. She's more of a dictator. I don't remember anyone who knew getting to vote for her. In fact, she was the only one candidate to be approved by the European Parliament, only won by one vote. Talk about somebody who hasn't got a democratic mandate. Hi, Ursula. But you've got people like Justin Trudeau, who's already out for the count in the Canadian, just waiting for the elections there. Olaf Scholz, again, completely failed, defeated leader. These people don't matter anymore. But I just find it absolutely extraordinary when Zelensky said, I think calling Trump's bluff rather brilliantly, listen, I will stand down. I care about peace now, not in 30 years. I will stand down as president in return for peace and NATO membership. And the key thing here with these peace talks that are ongoing, and we had the two foreign ministers the Secretary of State and the Foreign Minister of Russia and America meeting in Riyadh last week, is that Ukraine need to be at the table. It's not fair. It's not reasonable for them not to be at the table. Given that it's only their blood that has been spilt during this war, they haven't asked the European Union or Britain or America to spill their soldiers' blood. But there's no point having any peace deal whatsoever. It's not worth the paper it's printed on unless there is a guarantee, NATO membership or elsewhere, that not a single extra inch of territory is ever going to be taken. No leader could accept that because there's no doubt at all. He's made it very clear. Putin will simply come back for more.
Yeah, and actually, I think if Volodymyr Zelensky was to chart the kind of course that he's now talking about, to go into these negotiations and to say, look, I'm going to go out on this, I will go because, Donald, you clearly have a problem with me, but in exchange, I want the most, the lasting peace that my country aspires to, he will go down in history as one of the great wartime leaders of all time. Because that is the kind of selfless, servant-hearted leadership that actually, I think, is a little bit of an anathema to Donald Trump. Now, look, I would have voted for Trump. There's a lot of what I support in what he's saying. But I think at times that New York businessman, property magnate mentality shines forth a little bit too strong in his foreign policy. And we saw it in his first term, of course. Yeah. There were some things that worked very well, and there were some things that were just completely bonkers, like his attempts to do peace in North Korea. Didn't really work, didn't lead to anything.
How's that working out for you? Yeah, exactly.
But then on the other hand, his strengths does work. And this is what you get with Trump.
Well, that's what I said before. I would vote, if given the choice, I'd vote for Donald Trump. And there's loads of things on Israel, on the Doge, and we'll talk about that in a moment, the cutting costs and net zero and tick, 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 absolutely love it all. But I said again and again, but my biggest worry is Ukraine. I really thought at the time, in terms of world affairs, Middle East, Ukraine, one of them is going to get very, very, very dirty if Donald Trump's in charge. But I always had that little bit of hope that once he was actually in the White House, he might tone it down a bit, and actually he would provide support, because he would understand that Ukraine is fighting, in the same way Israel is, an existential battle against an enemy of the West, not an enemy of that particular country. But he's got a love-in with Vladimir Putin. There is no doubt at all about that. And every security expert I speak to on our affairs is absolutely convinced that there is compromise. That Vladimir Putin has got something on Donald Trump, or Donald Trump is just beholden to him in some way, that there's just no other explanation for why he would think that what Vladimir Putin does is acceptable. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Always do get in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Who do you trust most on Ukraine? Trump, Zelensky or Putin? Love to get you on air. Emmanuel Macron is off to be the first Western leader to go and meet Donald Trump in the White House. Keir Starmer, we think Thursday he's going to go to DC. Lots of talk about defence spending, possibly an announcement that it would be up from the current 2.3% of GDP, maybe to 2.5%. I mean, this is quite literally fiddling while Rome burns, isn't it? That doesn't touch the size of the needs of what we need to be spending. And it's way less than we were spending, not just during the Cold War, and even in the immediate aftermath of the Cold War. And our country's wealth, the GDP, hasn't actually grown that much in the last 20 years. The West are still, at some level, in denial about the threat that is currently facing the West and the need to, and America's likely, we're worrying about what's going on in the Pacific and the South China Sea. We really don't care what happens in Europe.
Yeah, and the idea that the world today is a safer place than it was in 1995. I mean, if you think that, I've got some snake oil to sell you. That is completely and utterly bonkers. We are now looking down the barrel of the most dangerous world that is in the lifespan of most people listening today. Yeah. We face a Chinese government that is deeply, deeply dangerous and has its eyes set on global dominance. We face dictators like Vladimir Putin. We face Iran potentially getting a nuclear bomb within the next few years. The threats we face around the world are growing exponentially as the entire world order that has dominated international affairs and guaranteed us peace for a lifespan is crumbling around us. We need to get serious, and get serious quickly, because, Keir Starmer's talking about, maybe sending troops to Ukraine. We couldn't even do it
as
if we wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We do not have the efforts. By the way, today we're going to have an announcement from Foreign Secretary David Lammy of some more sanctions against Kremlin-linked oligarchs. Hey, why the hell were these guys not sanctioned 3 years ago? I mean, on what planet is that acceptable? It's pathetic. But what do you make of the new, very likely new German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz? He's the leader of the CDU, the Christian Democrats, who've become the largest party, along with the CSU, their sort of sister party, in the German elections. They're likely to go into a coalition government, these sort of grand coalitions, along with the SPD, the Labour Party, effectively. Olaf Scholz just been ousted. But again, and this is the thing people complain about here, it doesn't matter whether you get CDU or SPD, Labour, Conservatives, you pretty much get the same government with the same policies anyway. But Friedrich Merz has said basically he thinks that, that ultimately he says NATO could be finished and Europe must prepare to build an alliance independent from the US. I mean, nice to know that someone might have actually recognised the reality of what's going on.
Sure, but Friedrich Merz is pretty much just a different badge on what we've seen exactly the same in the form of Olaf Scholz, because look at the guy's backstory. He's a banker, he's a former BlackRock type, he's been going off to Davos for many, many years. He is exactly what you think of when you think of the German elite politician that has dictated the affairs of that country for the last 20, 30 years or more. And you've got to question how sustainable this German model is. I saw that German politicians had been panicking, crying almost at the breakdown of the firewall that had kept the hard right out in...
the Alternative for Deutschland,
or more generally, other parties for 75 years. And I look at them and I think, do you know what, actually? If you hadn't sold out your country, if you hadn't imported 1 million people in a single year to come into Germany to take jobs that belong to working class people...
Oh, no, most of them aren't working. The people who came in the Syrian wave, most of them weren't Syrian. Most of those people aren't working, they're on benefits.
Either they're on benefits or they're pushing out people from the jobs that they're doing. If you think you can sell out your country's energy policy on some mad hat ideas to make it impossible to conduct manufacturing businesses in Germany, which, by the way, is what they were really, really good at, then is it any wonder that not only in all of the working class parts of Germany do the AfD win, not only there, but amongst 25 to 34-year-olds, i.e. those that have gone into the education system, come out with qualifications, had expected to have the same kind of life that their parents did, in which they could earn a good living, be able to go on a couple of holidays a year, be able to provide a house with, you know, a stable income for their families, that they have seen that inheritance to which they rightly feel that they had deserved, just like their parents and grandparents did, that they turn around and they think, no, do you know what? Shove you. I'm going to go for exactly who you don't want me to vote for because you have stolen my inheritance.
It's not, I don't even think they're voting for the AfD. I mean, and look, there are elements in the AfD which are genuinely, I would actually use the term, far right. They are racist, but not all of them, and certainly not the 20% of voters, because the AfD came second in this election, and some were saying, oh well, you know, but they didn't get quite as high as I think they've been in the polls a couple of points ahead. They have doubled their vote since the last election. Now, implications of this for Britain, of course, we don't have a PR system, but also, again, that PR system means effectively they can combine and prevent the AfD, even though they're second in the polls, from actually joining power. But I think what is really interesting, and you think of all these, I mean, every single day it's like, oh, another terror attack. Another terror attack by a failed asylum seeker from abroad who hates your country, whether it's Germany, whether it's France. It's happening virtually every day. Sweden, the violence there, huge number of people. And then everyone says, oh, but you shouldn't return to these awful hard right, they say far right parties. Why wouldn't you? I mean, you look at some of the policies, the FT, again, they're anti-EU. They're anti-net zero, so sane on two major issues. Crucially, also anti-mass scale immigration, harder on crime. Yeah, I mean, stop me when I say something you disagree with, you know. But also mass deportations. Oh, now shock horror, clutch my pearls. What, deporting people who've got no right to be in the country? Who isn't in favour of that? Apart from obviously the Labour front bench here, but like. Why aren't you in favour of people who aren't allowed to be in your country, who have lied and claimed, failed asylum seekers, who don't speak the language, who don't have any share in your culture, don't contribute whatsoever, who've been proven not to have a right to be in your country? Why wouldn't you want those people deported? I think that's weird. So a lot of these policies, people can say, oh, well, it's just a reaction to the mainstream. I think it's the same with Reform UK, and they're not as hard to the right as the AfD. I think they probably will be by the next election day, and I think they will also do very, very well, whether they win the election or don't win the election. It's a statement of intent from voters. We are not putting up this anymore. If you were Keir Starmer today, would you not be worried? You're basically the last centre-left politician left in Europe, pretty much.
If I was Keir Starmer, I would be terrified by these results, particularly, as I say, the fact that young people, we talk all the time about how Gen Z are snowflakes, and to some extent they are, but there is also a subset, particularly young men, that have seen themselves being told that they're privileged, that they've got everything going for them, and they do not see the world lining up with that, and they are prepared to rebel against it. Now, Keir Starmer is going to be, he's in a very fortunate position in that he's got his two biggest opposing parties splitting the vote at the moment. But if anything were to change on that, whether that was a pact, whether that was one or the other parties doing better or the other, he would be toast. He already got in on a famously loveless landslide. He only got 34%, fewer votes than Jeremy Corbyn, Keir Starmer got. Next time round, he could well go from hero to zero. Very vanishingly few Labour seats return.
It could be very, very interesting. So a lot to play for, and a lot of things we're reading about what's happening in America, what's happening in Europe. I want to hear from you, though, particularly on any of the topics we're talking about today, obviously, and there are many more to come. But in particular about who do you trust most on Ukraine? Is it Donald Trump, Zelensky or Putin? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. We're also going to be talking about Israel and the Palestinian prisoner release being indefinitely delayed. BBC and yet more outrageous Hamas propaganda, and that fantastic email from Elon Musk's Doge to every government employee in America asking, well, what they actually did last week. Wouldn't it be great to send that email to all of our government employees? I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. As I say, 0344 499 1000. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam Armstrong's still with us as well, and great to get to your calls. 0344 499 1000 is the number to have your say. Who do you trust most on Ukraine? Is it Donald Trump, President Zelensky, or Vladimir Putin? Love to hear your thoughts on that. Let's go to Peter. He is in Croydon. Hello, Peter.
Hello, Julia.
Good
Hello,
morning.
Sam.
Good
Trump last week, he was deliberate. He knew what he was doing. We know Trump wants peace, and he wants the $500 million back. So I think he's trying to get Zelensky to sign a deal to get the minerals, obviously. And if he does that, then that would win him a seat at the table at the peace.
Well, hold on a second. He hasn't said to Zelensky, OK, we'd like money. But by the way, it was, as Zelensky pointed out, this was never given as a loan. This was money that was given to help them fight this war against Vladimir Putin. It wasn't as a loan. But also, it's not like, OK, we want half of your minerals, because, I mean, Ukraine is huge. I mean, it's got so many natural resources. In return for continuing to give you aid, we'll just want half of those resources, full stop. Now, I'm sorry, he's supposed to be the man who's got the art of the deal. Well, you can't make a deal, post-rational and say, oh, well, this was the deal. The last American government didn't make it alone. He hasn't got any right to demand that money back.
Well, I mean, he wants some money back. Zelensky has never been saying, I'm not going to give the money back. But now it's on Sky in Australia. He says, there's no way I'm going to give the money back.
Well, there's no money. He doesn't have to give the money back. It was given to help protect. Look, I mean, this is the thing. By the way, America and Britain and Russia, quite some years ago, actually, when Ukraine gave up their nuclear weapons, they signed a deal, was it the Minsk Agreement, basically, that they would guarantee the borders of Ukraine. We have the duty of care to this country. Otherwise, don't sign those deals.
Well, I'm sorry, that's over my head, but I do.
No, because you know why, Peter? Because that's not one of the talking points from the Kremlin that's all over social media at the moment. That's why everyone forgets that point. Look, I mean, why do you think the Biden administration, and I had very little time for the Biden administration, as I'm sure you know, why do you think they gave all that money and all that military aid to Ukraine?
Well, but we know Biden doesn't know what he's doing anyway. So
no, but I mean, we've seen his Secretary of State, have you? I mean, he seemed to know what he was doing. Why do you think the American administration, and why did American Congress agree to billions and billions and billions of dollars worth of aid for Ukraine? Why do you think they did it?
Well, who would have signed it off Biden? Because Biden doesn't know what he's doing.
No. Congress, fundamentally, Congress has signs off the money. Why did they weren't all doolally? Why do you think that? Why do you think they funded? Why do you think that Britain and the EU? Why do you think we've been giving aid? Why do you think we've done that?
I don't know, but I still.
You don't know, really? Because a democratic nation state in Europe was invaded by a foreign dictator. That's why. I mean, OK, here's the thing. All right, let's just say Poland was invaded by Russia, or one of the Baltic states, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, right?
Well,
they're all in NATO, OK? So if Vladimir Putin invaded one of those, would we go to their aid, and should we?
Well, no, because there was no money involved. But
what? You're saying we shouldn't defend a nation, a fellow NATO member?
Oh, we should definitely. If Russia invaded Poland, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So, but there's no money involved, is there?
What do you mean there's no money involved?
I mean, I've been saying that for a long time. Zelensky, instead of being in his own country, he was out every country basically with his begging bowl. And I just think, I mean, can you imagine Churchill doing that in the Second World War?
Churchill literally went with a begging bowl to the American president. Yes, he literally did. Zelensky was actually in his country in a bunker for most of those 3 years, but he worked out he had to go and glad hand people and try and get the publicity to keep public opinion on side so he could get the money from other countries so he could save people in his own country. I'm not saying he's a saint, but fundamentally, I agree with what Sam Armstrong said. I think he's one of the great wartime leaders of the last century.
You think so? I don't.
Well, why not?
Why couldn't he go on Zoom saying, look,
he did most of his appearances. Sorry, but again, these are Kremlin talking points. This is the stuff that Kremlin is putting out on TikTok to try and persuade people. I mean, he did a Vogue cover. Yeah, he did any publicity he could so people were talking about Ukraine to pressure government ministers and politicians so they would give money so Ukraine was still on the front page. Isn't that what we'd want our own leader to do? If we couldn't defend ourselves, do you know that? We would be going with the begging bowl to our European neighbours and to America. I would like, if Keir Starmer had to be on his knees to save my country, I'd support that.
All right, do you think he should physically go to other countries while we're at war?
Yeah.
Do you think he should do that?
What? Why shouldn't he?
Well, I mean, like I say, Churchill, obviously got the money from America, but Churchill, he would have done it in Zoom or something.
I wouldn't have done it on Zoom, would he? Therefore, I'm not so up on my Second World history. Were there any troops? I don't think there were troops to America, but I don't. But someone I'm sure will correct me. Why is that such a sticking point for you?
Well, there was no. I mean, before Trump came in, there was no talk about peace, was there? No one spoke about peace whatsoever. We're going to keep on giving money to Ukraine, and Ukraine is what the most corrupt country in Europe. So where's the money gone?
Well, we know a lot of money will have disappeared, as it did in Iraq, as it did in Afghanistan, because war ends when there's a load of money and you've got chaos, you end up with corruption. But Peter, honestly, mate, I think you're hung up on various things. And by the way, I've always wanted peace. But you know what the peace I want? I want the peace of a democratic nation state being allowed to get its country back and get its people back to safety. If you want peace, you need to defeat Russia. End of. Really appreciate your call, Peter. I'm going to squeeze in Herbie, who's in Harrow as well. Hello, Herbie.
Good morning, Julia.
Good morning. What do you want to say?
What I want to say. What would Trump do if Mexico invaded America? Sit back and do nothing? And not defend it?
I mean, apparently he wants peace. He's the peace president, isn't he?
Well, he's not going to have peace if somebody's invading his country, is it? He's going to start snarling and growling and everything else because he'll want to defend his nation like anybody would.
Yeah.
You know, he's been elected as the president and he would have to defend the nation if he was being invaded, exactly as Ukraine's had to do. Where is this man's mentality all of a sudden?
Why do you think he doesn't back Ukraine? I can understand huge sums of money, but as a lot of people are pointing out, the money that we in Europe and America have spent, it's actually a pittance compared to what all-out war with Russia would cost us. We're not sending men and women to die on the battlefields.
No, but why is Putin doing all of this all of a sudden? You know, he knows he can't get away with it, you know, because if he gets away with this, he'll get away with other things.
I think he thought he would get away with it. He got away with Crimea in 2014. I think he thought he's going to walk straight in. He thought the West were weak, they wouldn't do anything, and he was completely surprised by their reaction.
Well, surprise, it hasn't happened, has it? The thing is, the world is at the moment teetering on disaster if we're not very careful. We cannot let this man carry on. Look, I know that Ukraine's got minerals that we need. They also feed the world as well, which is another problem. You know, what is going on? Can't this man see the danger we're in? Are we going to shut our eyes like we did in the Second World War? Oh, nothing will happen, and it's too late. It happened, and by God, we had to go begging bows, you say, to Americans to balance that. Only eventually after they was bombed in what's it? And the problem is that we do not learn from the lessons in history.
We never do we? So when I ask you trust most on Ukraine, Trump, Zelensky or Putin, you're saying Zelensky?
No, look, Zelensky's done the right thing. He's the man that was elected. Like Putin, he was elected the same as Ukrainers.
Yeah.
Why the hell is Trump trying to make them so small? What is behind the agenda?
That's what we need to get to, indeed. Herbie, I really appreciate that call. Thank you very much. That nonsense about not having elections. Oh, America had elections in the Second World War. Yeah, you weren't invaded, mate. It's rather different. We didn't. 10:33 is the time. Up next, we are going to be talking to Sir Ian Duncan-Smith about all of this and plenty more besides. But coming up after the break, I say more on Ukraine with the former Conservative leader, Ian Duncan-Smith. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Home of Common Sense. Thank you very much indeed. Welcome back to the show. Let's talk right now to former Conservative Party leader, still MP, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith. A very good morning to you.
Good morning, Julie.
Thank you very much for joining us. Hey, I'm putting the question to you that I've been putting to our audience and just had a right old ding-dong with Peter, one of our callers. Who do you trust most on Ukraine? Is it Donald Trump, President Zelensky or President Putin?
At the end of the day, it's got to be Zelensky because it's Ukraine that's been invaded. America hasn't been invaded, and Russia wasn't invaded, but it invaded Ukraine. So by a process of simple elimination, we have to stand with Zelensky. I listened to your caller earlier on. He said, you know, Churchill didn't get around. Actually, Churchill flew everywhere during the war.
Did he? I had thought he might have done, but I wasn't sure enough, so I didn't want to say.
I can tell you straight off, 4 or 5 times to America to plead for money and equipment. He had joint meetings with Stalin and with Roosevelt in a whole variety of places. He had more air miles than all the other leaders put together, and then some. And he had double pneumonia at one point. He had a heart attack whilst in the United States, quietly kept from the British public. He was as tough as old boots, but without that, without rallying support, without bringing everybody together, we would have lost the war.
Really, it's so good to have that information, because this is the thing, is that I'm fascinated in the last week by the lines, the things that Donald Trump has said. Oh, he's a dictator. He wasn't elected. But also, like, you know, all these talking points about, you know, swanning around, doing a Vogue cover. Yeah. You can see where this stuff is coming from. That this guy is a fake. He's after something else. Zelensky called his bluff yesterday, didn't he? By simply saying,
he did.
I will stand down. I will stand down.
Yeah.
If you can give me peace and NATO membership to guarantee that peace, I'll stand down. But do you think that bluff will be called back?
No, I think the reality, though, is for President Trump. I understand what he's doing at the moment. He came in wanting to get out of Ukraine, and they also want to cut defence spending, but focus more to the Far East. I understand that. Europe's got to do more, and we are to blame the countries of Europe for not having stepped up on defence enough. Although Europe has outspent the United States when it comes to Ukraine, which is a simple fact. However, the important thing here is I think he's got it wrong with Putin. He thinks that a bit of territory for Putin and an absolute guarantee of no NATO membership will be enough for Putin. It won't be. Putin isn't interested in territory. He's interested in sovereignty. He believes that he must recreate the boundaries of the old Soviet Union. He hated the idea of Ukraine becoming a country after the collapse of the Soviet Union in the Cold War. And he has been determined ever since to absorb it back into Russia, and also because of the huge amount of minerals, and also the fact that they grow huge amounts of wheat, which is exportable to the rest of the world. He wants all that back, and he won't stop until he's got it. So if he has a short peace, which is what's being proposed, he will be back again after having reconstructed his armed forces, and Ukraine will not exist, and they will be going from a democracy to an autocracy, and we will have condemned them to that. It's as simple as that. They're wrong on their reading of Putin.
Yeah, and this is the thing. Why do you think that Donald Trump has got Putin so wrong? We know he likes a strong man. We know that. He's always, whether it's, Viktor Orban or Erdogan, or, he seems to love these figures, but he seems to be particularly admiring of Vladimir Putin. But I mean, his reading of Vladimir Putin doesn't seem to tally with literally anyone else who's sane and who's paying attention to the details. Why do you think that is? Lots of people are saying, Putin's got compromat on him, that there's some deal between the two. I'm never a conspiracy theorist, but I can't think of any other explanation.
No, it's not that. He likes to deal with strong leaders. Strong leaders tend to be, for the most part, totalitarians. So they can govern because they don't have to have elections. And he likes that because he thinks that they make decisions, and he prides himself on him making decisions. I think, in a way, what you've got to understand with Trump is that he wants to end the war, and he wants to do it quickly. And he thinks that these offers will be enough to get Putin over the line. They won't be. Putin's an old KGB man. What he'll do is go, great, thank you very much indeed. Yup, we're going to go for peace. And at the last moment, what they'll go, which they've already done, by the way, in Saudi. Hang on, no European peacekeepers. That's another no-no. And each time they'll come up with just a little more, because he knows that Trump is in a hurry. And when you're negotiating with someone in a hurry, the best thing you can do is just slow it down, because eventually their frustration will mean they will agree to almost anything to get you out the door. And that's what's going to go on with this. So I understand why Trump wants to do this and wants to put the speed on it. But I think the problem right now is that Putin is smarter in this regard, and there's nothing that the KGB don't do but to get their own interest across whenever they're
absolutely. But also, in that start of negotiations, Mr. Art of the deal, he's given away, OK, they won't have NATO membership, we're not going to fund them anymore, and I've run my election on the basis we're going to get peace, we're going to get it quickly. Well, I mean, again, you've literally given away all of your negotiating points straight away. I mean, given Putin the upper hand. In terms of Europe right now, I mean, European leaders, Canadian leader, many other representatives there over in Ukraine right now, everyone's saying all the right things. But one thing Donald Trump has been right about all along, back in his first term as well, Europe has not been stepping up in the last many decades in terms of supporting its own defence and its own and paying for it. And let's put more money into the NHS and the welfare state, but not, and then expect American taxpayers to fund our defence. So he's been quite right on that. But Keir Starmer,
that's the one thing I agreed with Vance about. When Vance came out and did a bit of a rant, but he said basically Europe has caved in to wokeism and to welfare. And that's true. The trouble is, for the UK and other countries, is that we haven't sorted our economies out. Now, all parties are to blame for this, but the key thing is we do need to have defence spending, I think, actually at a minimum of 3%.
Well, I was going to ask you, because we're at 2.3% now, and that includes things like defence pensions. I'm sorry, as important as they are, they ain't helping us with our war effort today. Talk about getting it up to 2.5%. We know even Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, apparently is giving in to the yes, there is going to have to be this extra cost. We have money to give to, the Mauritians to take the Chagos Islands off our hands for some reason, tens of billions there, but we don't have money for defence. But realistically, 2.5%, even 3%, doesn't touch the sides of the need.
No, it isn't. And I know that what America wants them to do is to move to 5%. Now, we did go to 5%. We went to 5% during the Cold War when Thatcher and Reagan worked together. And this is my main point. I wrote an article about it today. I said, if Keir Starmer wants to play any role at all, it's very important that he now recognises that he has to get alongside Trump, not for any personal reasons, but because when the UK and the US are together, the world is a safer place. When we are parted from each other, the world is less safe. And we've seen it endlessly from Vietnam right the way through. When we don't agree with each other and America goes off on its own or does something, what happens is the world falls into a greater level of threat. So he's got to get, when he goes over there to Washington, and say to him, look, remember Reagan and Thatcher. Thatcher helped you get Europe up to 5% defence spending and also stand off against the Russian deployment or the Soviet deployment of SS-20s and force them to back down. And that was done because we worked together over it. He's got to try and explain to Trump that the real problem with Ukraine is not an isolated issue. Ukraine is part of this drive by this axis of totalitarian states to govern more and more of the world. Xi is the key behind all of this with the money, right? Russia isn't the Soviet Union anymore, but Xi backs them. And so what happens if Ukraine goes down, then Taiwan will be next. Why Taiwan is important to us? Well, I'll tell you why. Because the hit from the Russian invasion of Ukraine was about $1 trillion to the world economy. Any takeover or blockade of Taiwan will cost $10 trillion minimum. 72% of everything produced in the world is produced in the area of the South China Seas, China and Taiwan. Anything that crashes that, the whole world goes down.
And crucially, the high tech, it's
exactly. And he
vital.
needs to recognize, Trump needs to recognize, you cannot just swipe Ukraine off the map. Because if you do, Xi's watching and he will say, of course, they'll never stand up for Taiwan. We're in.
Absolutely, absolutely. Again, I had high hopes that Donald Trump would change his tune once he got into office. Those have been cruelly, cruelly dashed, and I feared they would be. Sir Duncan-Smith, I so appreciate you joining us, former Conservative Party leader. Thank you for that. Sam Armstrong, your response to what he had to say?
Yeah, it's absolutely right. We are facing a cabal of nations around the world that not only don't share our values, but are determined to tear down a system by which Western countries, the United States, our allies in Europe, and look, I've got my problems with them, the UK, the Commonwealth, have been calling the shots on the world stage for the last almost 100 years. They hate it, right? If you're a dictator, you hate it. And when they're coming after Ukraine, when they're coming after Taiwan, when they're coming after us, when they want to build a huge, great big spy hub on the near the Tower of London, it's those values, it's that order that they're prepared to tear down. So I don't support Ukraine just because I think the Ukrainians are right, though I do. I support Ukraine because they're defending us just as much as they're defending them.
Absolutely, and I really think people need to get to grips with that. Again, I wrote a piece of The Sun about this a couple of weeks ago. We are in Neville Chamberlain, Sudetenland, peace for our time territory, and horribly, horribly deluded it was then, and horribly deluded it is now. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Lots of calls ready to board. I promise we'll get to more in the next half hour. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Time now, though, to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning £25,000.
It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Well, good luck to you for that. Now, coming up after the break, only 1 in 6 energy bosses think the world can achieve net zero by 2050. I'm telling you that 1 in 6 energy bosses is a complete and utter liar. This, as the government orders shale gas fracking companies to concrete over their wells. Yeah, that seems like a really good idea, doesn't it? We're going to talk to the author of Not Zero, Ross Clark, about that up next. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam Armstrong's also still with us, so let's get his thoughts on what our next guest has to say, because there are a number of different, the usual climate change hysteria stories and net zero stories I want to talk to Ross Clark about. He's, of course, the author of Not Zero, How an Irrational Target Will Impoverish You, Help China, and Won't Even Save the Planet. He's the author of the best book titles in the world. Ross Clark, thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, Julia.
Now, I know you had subsequent books, but this is a particular area of your knowledge and expertise I want to talk to you about. Three particular stories when it are in the news today on the green stuff. First of all, 1 in 6 energy bosses, according to your poll, and it's a poll that's often, they ask energy bosses what they think about net zero. 1 in 6 of them say that the world can achieve net zero by 2050, but it was about half of them only a year ago. What's changed, or have they all just come up for air and realised that sanity might be a good idea and just one of them is still lying?
Yes, reality, that's what's happened. This is the Energy Industries Council, and every year it sort of surveys its sort of members, chief executives, senior executives, asks us a very simple question: do you think the world can achieve net zero by 2050? Last year, 45% said yes. This year, it's 16%. So that's quite a drop, isn't it? As sort of reality sets in.
Exactly. What has changed? Because the facts haven't changed. And one of the things that you and I always talk about this is just sort of anyone paying attention, anyone who has the vaguest knowledge about our energy consumption, our energy needs, and what is needed to deliver a modern 21st century state would know that it wasn't achievable. And yet they've all been saying, oh yes, it is. Is a lot of this actually the arrival of Donald Trump and saying this is all nonsense, get rid of it? Is a lot of this actually, it's politically now safe to say this?
Well, I think there's certainly politics involved. I mean, if you hear Donald Trump, I mean, he's absolutely not interested in net zero at all. So obviously that makes it extremely difficult for the world to even embark on this path. It's sort of rather pointless. Europe, for example, trying to reach net zero if America and China aren't doing. But, the other side is the sheer practicalities, which are becoming ever more, you take the hydrogen industry, for example. I mean, a few years ago, big talk about hydrogen. It was going to act as our energy store for intermittent renewables. It's going to power our boilers and our cars and everything. Well, that industry seems to be running into the ground. It's running into very difficult problems. The electrolysis of green hydrogen from water is proving extremely expensive and problematic, and
so a whole policy based on a technology that hadn't really been developed and doesn't really work. Oh, what a brilliant idea! I mean, this is the territory we've been in, though, isn't it? I mean, there's so many of the policies that I think each of them, one by one, is going to fall by the wayside. As like the policies on electric vehicles, on how we heat our homes, the heat pump requirement, and things like that. They're just all gradually going to fall by the wayside because they simply don't work. But they also doesn't work when it comes to jobs. We were told we're going to have these amazing green jobs. There's some stats out today saying so many of these jobs are in the green industry. A lot of them are paper pushing jobs rather than actually building anything. But it's been interesting how much being green has been a big part of sort of the multinational companies sort of greenwashing of their images. But companies even like BP, British Petroleum, have tried to go green, but it turns out they are now facing what people are saying is an existential crisis after attempts to go green. I mean, can you be a fossil fuel company and go green?
Well, BP tried it, didn't they? They set themselves these targets to decarbonise their operations. They're involved in green energy and so on. But their ventures into green energy have not been a huge success, and that's the same for many countries. You look at the BP's a little bit better off than what used to be called the Danish oil natural oil and natural gas organization. It sort of now called what is it called? Anyway, it's the Danish company. It's real trouble. It's gave up sort of switch from oil and gas to renewables, and the renewables haven't proved very profitable, and now in serious trouble. Yeah. And you see that throughout the green industry. The renewable energy shares, if you're invested in those, they've absolutely ploughed in the last few years, as it's become quite clear that green energy is not quite as cheap as people thought it was. It was cheap when interest rates were virtually zero, but when they went up, it suddenly
But also, voters don't notice as much if the government is, basically what Boris Johnson says, spaffing, billions up the wall on these things. When times are very, very tight, people can't pay their energy bills, they start noticing these things, and we certainly have, haven't we? One last story I want to talk to you about, which again just breaks my soul. This really does. The Energy Secretary, Ed Miliband, he's being accused of playing into Vladimir Putin's hands, as he's basically ensuring that we do go ahead with a plan to basically fill in with cement the last remaining shale gas wells in this country. And I remember when Quadrilla were ordered to do this a while ago, and it's been ongoing and ongoing. We've had numerous MPs and peers, like Craig McKinley and others, basically saying this is insane. We've got these wells that have been dug. We may need to get these shale gas out, but you're ordering the concrete mixers to go in. They've arrived on site. This is going to happen in a matter of days or weeks. And at a time when Europe is still completely beholden to Vladimir Putin for Russian gas. And we import an awful lot of our gas because we don't produce enough ourselves anymore because of net zero. And now a possible future source of it, and a source which has meant that, gas is really cheap comparatively in America because of their fracking. We're about to literally fill those wells up with concrete and make them unusable. What on earth are they thinking?
Well, it's a scorched earth policy on the part of Ed Miliband, isn't he? Not content with sort of denying new licenses for oil and gas extraction. He wants to sort of make it impossible for gas extraction, shale gas extraction, to take place in Britain in future. Yeah. I mean, it's a huge waste of resources, which could not only be providing us with more energy security, but could also be cutting costs and reducing carbon emissions. Because if we use gas produced in Britain, that is far more efficient from an energy and emissions point of view than importing gas by refrigerated ship in the form of liquefied natural gas, which is what we're doing. Because if you do that, you sort of lose a tenth of the energy in the liquidization
and the cost of deporting. That's it. But as you know, Ross Clark, those net zero targets aren't dependent on anything sensible in the real world and overall effect. It's what matters on our balance sheet, because it's all smoke and mirrors.
It is. It only includes UK territorial emissions. So if we import gas, the emissions produced in the production of that don't count. The emissions in the production of cars and other consumer goods in China don't count on our energy budget, nor food. So, from the government's point of view, simply to achieve that net zero target has this perverse incentive to offshore all our industry, all our food production and chemical industries and so on. And that is in practice what is happening. And the same with electricity. We're now importing 16% of our electricity via subsea cables from Norway, France and elsewhere. Again, the emissions in the production of that electricity, they're being counted on other countries' budgets.
I mean, the whole thing...
We're impoverishing ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. It is genuinely, whenever I talk to people about this, it's genuinely insane. It is not possible to know about this topic and to think these policies are sensible, achievable, affordable or desirable. And yet, there we go. We've got a government fully signed up to it. And by the way, chief opposition fully signed up to it too as well. Ross Clark, author of Not Zero. You've been a fantastic authoritative figure on this stuff. Again, just a journalist looking into these things. Thank you so much for joining us. Sam Armstrong, I have to say, this is, to me, one of those things where the Tories, I know you're a big Conservative campaigner, it's one of the things that the Tories really fall down on. Robert Jenrick, I know, has come round to the dropping net zero. I think this is going to be one of Reform UK's biggest selling points at the next election, is dropping these insane, unachievable, impossible, far too expensive targets.
Yeah, all you need to know about the British public is, yeah, they're broadly speaking in favour of doing what it takes to produce clean and as good energy as we possibly can. Nobody wants to burn dirty coal everywhere that turns the whole country black with soot.
But we weren't doing that anyway.
But what the people of this country are not signed up to do, are not signed up, and no amount of spin, no amount of paid for lies from this industry that's got rich on the back of it will prove, is they are not in favour of impoverishing themselves to hit some arbitrary standard that nobody signed up to in the first place, that had just 90 minutes of scrutiny in the House of Commons when it was voted on in the first place. It's madness, and the sooner that politicians get around to ending it, the better.
Well, absolutely. And again, Kemi Badenoch hasn't signed up to this yet, and she really, really, really should get with the programme on this as well. Look, so much more to talk about. More from Sam Armstrong, lots more top guests. We're going to talk more about what that German result for the Alternative for Deutschland, the AfD, what that means, have them come second for Reform UK here. Not directly comparable parties, but there'll be a lot read into that. Also, that Elon Musk Doge email to all government staff in America. What did you do last week? What did you actually achieve last week? I wonder if you'd be able to answer that. I wonder if I'd be able to answer that. We'll talk about all of that. Don't forget your calls about Ukraine as well. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
very, very good morning to you. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DB Plus Radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, or your connected device, it's great to have your company. Great also to have the company of commentator Sam Armstrong joining us. And great to be back. I've got to be honest with you, it's great to be back sitting down. I was away skiing last week. It's not a holiday. I mean, I'm going to need a holiday to recover from the holidays. I got a lot of activity with the right arm as well. Obviously a bit of après, but there we are. But very nice to be back with you all. Thank you very much for having me back after, as I say, absolutely brilliant Alex Phillips. Always love having her doing the show. And I'm sure you do as well. But I'm with you all the way until 1 o'clock. Coming up in this hour, more on Vladimir Zelensky saying that he would be willing to step down as Ukrainian president in return for NATO membership for his country and a guarantee of peace. The surprise remarks were made ahead of today's 3-year anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Question I'm putting to you today is, who do you trust most on Ukraine? Is it Donald Trump? Is it Vladimir Zelensky? Or is it Vladimir Putin? Because an awful lot of people online seem to think Vladimir Putin is the person to trust. Poor Vladimir, forced to invade a sovereign nation state on his border. Poor little thing, eh? I do not get why people think that. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Who do you trust most? Bearing in mind, there is a wrong answer. There really is a wrong answer. I'm taking on all comers. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. You can get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Also going to be talking to the brilliant Ralf Schellhammer about the German election results, as the Conservative CDU party has won the country's elections, and the party's leader, Friedrich Merz, who's marginally less unforgettable than Olaf Scholz, the last Chancellor. He's set to become the next Chancellor in a coalition with the defeated left-wing party, the SPD, because, again, everyone who wants PR, I know a lot of people who support Reform UK, Nigel Farage always talk about this, getting PR. You get PR, you just end up with the two main parties going into coalition with each other. This, as the far-right AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland party, doubled their vote from one election to the other to 20%. But they're being excluded by all the other parties from any coalition talks. By the way, it might take them up to 2 months to actually get a government in office. This is no way to run a modern nation state. It really isn't. Plus, we're going to be talking about the utterly brilliant move by Elon Musk at DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency in America. He sent an email via HR to all staff working in the US government. They've got until midnight tonight, US Eastern Time, to reply to the email, asking them, well, what have you done in the past week? 5 bullet points. What have you actually achieved in the past week? And if you don't reply, you will be considered to have resigned from your job. Some key departments, like the FBI and others, have said do not comply. But don't we need a bit of that here? By the way, not just in the public sector, in the private sector too. Love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Same number, 0344 499 1000. Sam Armstrong, let's come back to Ukraine. We've got lots of calls coming in on this, so I'll get to those as soon as I can. But so we'll keep our comments, I think, a bit briefer than they were earlier, because you and I, we could do the full 3 hours on this. Third anniversary of the Russian invasion, the full-scale invasion. 2014 was an invasion of Crimea, of course, by Russia. Zelensky offering to stand down in return for peace and NATO membership. Donald Trump wanting money back. We had a caller earlier, Peter, saying, well, America wants its money back. America didn't offer loans to Ukraine to help them stand firm against Vladimir Putin until January the 20th. I think most people were under the impression that Vladimir Putin was the baddie, but apparently not according to Donald Trump. What do you make of this battle between Zelensky and Donald Trump? A war of words, almost.
Well, I think Donald Trump has got himself into a position in which he's mistaken. I don't think it is to do with the compromat or anything like this.
You don't think Putin's got anything on him?
I don't think Putin has got anything on him. I think what we have is a situation here in which Donald Trump has been misadvised by people around him, and Tulsi Gabbard and others. I have serious concerns about. I don't think they're good people. His Director of National Intelligence. And he's got himself into a complete and utter pickle. And what Donald Trump does, credit to him, is when he gets into a place, he's always fighting, and he will fight until the last minute. Now, look, everybody makes mistakes. I don't believe in perfect people and evil people, right? But most people are somewhere on the spectrum. Donald Trump has made a mistake, and it's a feature of his personality that he's only going to double down.
He's not going to row back.
Way.
Yeah. But what do you make? I mean, we've got all the European leaders. I mean, right now, a lot of the other sort of media broadcasters, they've got, speech after speech in Kyiv. And we've got, the Ursula von der Leyen. By the way, if you want to talk about dictator unelected, hello. Do you remember electing her when you were in the EU? I don't. You've got, always other world leaders. We've got Zoom from Keir Starmer, and everyone is saying their bit and offering their support. Again, I know Britain was at the forefront of offering support to Ukraine, and we had since 2014 been training troops and the like. I've never felt that Europe has done enough. We weren't able to do enough because we don't have enough military might ourselves. And Germany, by the way, was absolutely shocking. I think they offered sort of some second-hand helmets. Mind you, Germany some years back did some NATO training, didn't they? Did some of these training missions, and they had to use, while Ursula von der Leyen, by the way, was the German defence minister, they had to use broomsticks. They used just broomsticks as guns because they didn't have enough guns. So most European countries, certainly the Western rich countries, haven't got enough military to defend ourselves, let alone another country. They've needed America. But the new, likely German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, he's saying, look, NATO could be finished. I've been worried for a long time that even if a NATO country was invaded, whether it's Poland, whether it was the Baltic states, that actually NATO countries wouldn't stand up. People like Germany and others were dragged kicking and screaming to help Ukraine. I mean, is it now fundamentally the reality that America ain't going to be guaranteeing peace in Europe anymore, and we all need in the West to stand up for ourselves? And that, I'm afraid, is going to cost an awful lot of money.
Well, if it is, it won't be America's fault. Let me tell you whose fault it will be. It will be politicians in Europe who have been warned again and again and again that you signed up to a treaty saying that you would do something, and yet again, every single time you have failed to do it. We're always lectured by these people, right, by the way, that, you signed up to a treaty, you have to respect international law.
Oh, they care about international law desperately, don't they, when it suits them?
Where was their respect for their commitment in an international treaty of exactly the same standing to spend that money? If you want to know who is a Russian agent, by the way, in my view, Olaf Scholz is a far more likely candidate, the outgoing German Chancellor, than Donald Trump.
Totally beholden to the Russians.
He has sold out the energy position of Germany in a way that has pumped billions upon billions of euros into the Russian economy. He has systematically failed to arm Ukraine. He has done the bare minimum possible to rearm his own country. And the German people, and indeed many other European nations, have enriched themselves, and I put it this starkly, have enriched themselves at the expense of the American taxpayer. So if you want to know who to blame, if you want to know who to blame for America pulling the plug after 30 years of this, look at your own governments, look at the decisions they've made, look at the nonsense woke rubbish they've been funding instead of paying for a military, and start by dealing with them. And then, and only then, may you just save the NATO system that has kept our continent free and safe for so long.
In Britain, many countries, the Polands, the Latvias, they get it. They've been spending the correct percentage of their GDP on defence because they understand that the real-time threat of a Russian invasion. They've lived under Russian control before. They know what that means. But this is the thing. Everyone's living in fantasy land. Let's just spend more on benefits for people who are perfectly able-bodied. Let's just plough more money into the NHS and not expect any more operations to be done. Let's just give, for no reason at all, the Mauritians 18 billion quid of our money to take a country they have got no claim on whatsoever, take the Chagos Islands. We throw money around on stuff, but don't completely forget that you have to be able to protect yourself and your allies. I find it extraordinary, but I also find it extraordinary. I've got a full board of calls. I promise we're going to get to them. I just find it utterly extraordinary how many people do not get that this is an existential battle for democracy in Europe against an evil. I mean, I would use that word evil about him, not a word I throw around lightly about Vladimir Putin. That man would happily kill people with his own bare hands. That man cares about nothing. Have you seen what his troops have been ordered to do in Ukraine? It's absolutely shocking. And how anybody could stand by and say, well, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Or, it's the Russian sphere of influence. Let's give him East Germany as well then, yeah? Happy to give him East Germany? Where else do you want to give him? Yeah, I mean, where else are you going to give Putin? Because I think a lot of those people might have something to say about it. And I think we've got such weak Western leadership and across the board, we really have. And people are just now waking up to the reality that we are living in a very dangerous world and we need to get our act together. And 2.3% of the country's GDP, which has been flatlining for 20 years pretty much, going on our self-defence is simply not enough. Especially when half of that basically is nuclear deterrent, which I'm fully in favour of, only if people are willing to use it. that means we haven't got that money to be spent on conventional warfare, which we really need to do. And I don't know where anyone got the idea that the world was getting safer. I mean, the Islamofascism threat alone would account for needing more spending, let alone Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin and everything else going on. But there we are. I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts. So, question I'm asking, who do you trust most on Ukraine? Is it Donald Trump? Is it Zelensky? Is it Putin? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. We're going to have some new sanctions announced from David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, on oligarchs with links to the Kremlin. 3 years on from the war. I mean, that's how useless our governments have been. Let's talk briefly about the German elections. Do you think that the CDU, basically Angela Merkel's old party, Friedrich Merz is the leader now, winning that the majority, well, the biggest party in the German parliament, they're going to go into a coalition with the SPD. So it's basically the Tories and Labour in coalition, to all intents and purposes. They're keeping out the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland. Do you think that has a warning for Britain, and particularly for Labour and the Tories, about the threat of Reform UK, Nigel Farage?
Yeah, let's be clear what it is. It's an establishment stitch-up that's going on in Germany in order to keep out the challengers there. Now, look, I got my problems with those challengers, but here's the thing. The situation in Germany is going to get worse over the next 5 years. Of course it is, right? They're going to keep up with the same old stupid policies that have driven them into this mess in the first place. And what are the German people going to say at the next election, right? You all clubbed together to try and keep these guys out. Yep. These guys told you it was a problem. We said that 20% of us plus have said that, like, we're prepared to countenance these guys. We sent you a message. You didn't listen. It's got worse. And next time round, believe me, you may well see an AfD Chancellor walking into the Bundestag as the leader, and then all hell is going to break loose.
I think that I can certainly see that the main parties could actually do exactly as Labour and the Tories here. They talk a good game about tackling immigration, not having mad, policies like the net zero. They might talk about some of these things, but they don't really mean any of it. That's the main issue, because at least people know the AfD, and again, I don't think they're a comparable party with Reform UK. I don't like people saying far right. They've got some very nasty elements in the AfD. People will say, well, if we're going to have a party that's going to carry out these policies, we'd rather have a party that we think actually means it.
Yeah, and Julia, here's the thing. They can't lie about it anymore, right? They can't lie about immigration. It has reached a stage in which it affects every single high street in this country. Wherever you walk, whenever you attempt to access a service, whenever you go for a job, you are facing the consequences of mass, uncontrolled migration that was imposed upon you against your repeated democratic will. It's the same in Germany. It's the same here. And these mainstream politicians can say all they want, but the lie just doesn't wash it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, it really doesn't. And again, you look at the number of terror attacks as well. I mean, just day after day after day on mainland Europe. And we have seen a lot here, and a lot that are stopped here as well, being stopped by authorities. But it's just off the scale. And nearly always by people who've been on a watch list, who shouldn't be in the country. And again, people talk about, the AfD, they're in favour of deportations. What, of people who've got no right to be in your country? Yeah, who isn't in favour of that? What psychopath thinks you have no right to be here, but you should absolutely stay here? Well, apart from all of our immigration tribunal judges, it would appear. We've really got to get rid of this stuff. We do. Can I just ask you also, though, about this Doge email? Elon Musk basically saying to government staff, can you please tell us by midnight on Monday, what did you actually achieve last week? What did you actually get done? 5 bullet points, please. No, don't reply with anything that's officially a secret or anything. If you don't reply, we will assume that you have decided to resign. Same as that, if you don't turn up for work in your office, you've been working from home, if you don't turn up to the office on Thursday, whenever it was, you will consider you've resigned. Don't we need a bit of that here?
I mean, since when do you have the right to a job in which you do nothing? Since when is that some divine right handed to you that you go into the public sector, you clock in, you clock out, you retire 30 years later on some gold-plated pension? In this country, productivity in the private sector in the last 30 years has gone up by about 30%. It's not as much as it should, but it's gone up a lot. It has stayed totally static in the public sector. These people, despite the fact that they've got the internet, despite the fact they've got computers and all this AI stuff that's helping them get on with stuff, have got no more efficient.
Yep.
Why? Because they are 30% lazier than they were a generation ago. And we are told as taxpayers to just accept it. Look, I'm self-employed. I've been fired by clients, I've been hired by clients. It happens all the time. And every day that I go in to do work for someone, I know I have to justify the business case for me being there. And frankly, if you can't come up with a bullet point list of what you've achieved in a full-time job in the course of a week, then maybe it didn't need doing in the
Absolutely.
chuffing
I say
place.
one of my things is chuffing. We need to say the word chuffing more on this show. I like that. I had a temp, lots of temp secretarial jobs, and I was waitressing, do everything. I was straight after uni and before uni, but I had a temp job, and genuinely, it was 2 weeks I was in this office, and the boss at the end of it said to me, he said, how's it been? I said, it's been the most exhausting job I've ever done in my life. So I said, because trying to look busy is exhausting. Your secretary does nothing all day. There is nothing to do. It's not like she's got everything done beforehand and there's loads of stuff storing up and I'm not able to do it. Your secretary does absolutely not. I'm trying to do someone out of a job, but someone is taking the mick here. How people do a job where they just have to try and look busy a lot of the time. I suppose that's why you like to work from home, because you can walk the dog and do the laundry at the same time, can't you? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do get in touch. If you were asked, what 5 things did you get done last week at work? I say I was falling down a mountain. I wasn't at work, but give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Up next, going to be getting lots of your calls up about who do you trust most on Ukraine? Is it Trump, Zelensky or Putin? This is Talk, Home of Common Sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. 11:21 is the time. Sam Armstrong's still with me. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and you are on the phone lines, 0344 499 1000. Question: who do you trust most on Ukraine? Is it Trump? Is it Zelensky or Putin? Well, let's go straight to those phone lines. Dave is in London. Good morning to you, Dave.
Hi, Julia. How are you?
Very well indeed, sir. What do you want to say?
I don't think it's really a question of which of them we trust the most. I think it's more about a lot of the people I keep hearing that are talking about boots on the ground. Let's go in. Let's back up Zelensky. I want all commentators like yourself, like Sam sitting there, who's always got a lot to say for himself. Have you signed up if we are going to war? Because your daughter will soon be fighting age, Julia, so I presume you'd be putting her in the line of fire.
Yeah.
Sam, you'd be signing up to go, I assume.
Think he'd be any use? I'd be more use than Sam.
Yes, possibly so, but that's what I want to know now from commentators.
Would we sign up?
It's all very well with the Blackadder sketch with old.
But here's the thing, Dave. Here's the thing. So when we say that we want more people to get more operations on the NHS or more people to be teachers, you don't go, well, are you going to go and train as a surgeon, Julia? Are you going to go train up as a teacher? You don't ask that. I don't think virtually anyone is talking about British troops going to fight and lose their lives in Ukraine. President Zelensky was adamant about that from day one. No, we'll do the fighting. We just need the military weaponry to be able to do that. They've never asked anyone to spill their blood. The only talk that Keir Starmer said is a British peacekeeping force as part of a NATO, a coalition force as for peacekeepers. That's quite different. No one's asking British people to die.
No one is yet. But we're still in stage 1 of the war. Nobody asked a lot of people to join the Second World War, but as the war went on, more and more people started to be dragged into it. So
do you think we are in effectively Sudetenland territory, and we're going to do a peace deal, peace for our time, wave the piece of paper on the way back down the plane, and everything's going to look fine. Then in a couple, I think it was a year later, wasn't it? It was just under a year later that we were at war with Germany. So maybe we ought to face up to that.
True, but when you say we were at war, it will be the white working class boys of Essex and Darlington.
And the black working class boys of Essex as well.
Yeah, but it won't be. It'll be the white working class lads that'll get dragged up first, and you know it. It won't be everybody else, and everyone else that sits there going, "Come on, lads, I'll be right behind you." Yes, 30 miles behind you.
Okay,
but that are going to get slaughtered on the battlefield. Remember that.
It is largely young men who are in the military. And the people who are going to be will be the people who have signed up to. No one's forced right now to go into the army or go into the Navy or the Air Force.
Well, no, they're not. But we haven't got an army that would fill Wembley Stadium, so they're going to have to start moving to conscription pretty soon. So people need to start putting their hand up and saying, it doesn't need to be young people, right? If you're fit enough to go. I'm in my early 60s. I'm probably fit enough to fight. I'd go rather than my sons, for example.
Well, a little bit later, we're going to be talking to Mesa Gifford. He's a former British volunteer with the Ukrainian army. He's also fought against ISIS as well. I mean, I'm in awe of people who go and do that sort of stuff. I tell you what, if it was my country, 100%, I'd be on the front line. 100%. I would fight for my country. No one is asking people to fight for Ukraine. If we actually gave Ukraine the military aid they needed, we gave it to them sooner, they wouldn't even be at war still.
100% you'd be on the front line. Would you put your daughter on the front line?
That would be up to her. But with conversations we've had about whether or not we would stay and fight if our country invaded, she said to me, yes, she'd want to stay and fight. But that would be up to her. Or she'd be conscripted, in which case it wouldn't be up to her, but it wouldn't be up to anybody who got conscripted. No, I would rather we didn't go to war. The best way of not going to war is to make it clear that you are willing and able to go to war. And what the West has basically said to the dictators around the world, not just Vladimir Putin, not just Xi Jinping, but also mullahs of Iran, we've basically said, we're not willing and we're not able. We'll give you a bit of money, but as soon as our energy bills go up, then we all will probably try and get out of it. I mean, that's what we've said.
No, I do agree, but just remember that in World War II, we were all saying, come on, then let's have a go. And within 3 weeks, the Germans had taken France. It wouldn't take a couple of bombs to land on Hyde Park, and a lot of people would start to change their minds very quickly.
I'll tell you what, they changed their minds very quickly to actually go to the front. The evidence is actually people change their minds very quickly to actually go and fight for their country. But Dave, so appreciate that call. Thank you. Sam, I'm going to let you answer for yourself. Would you?
Yeah, well, here's the thing, right? The trouble with what Dave is saying is basically every argument we've heard today about Ukraine, the same would have applied for Poland in 1939. Right? Poland was in Germany's backyard. We had given over Poland after the First World War to an independent country. And by the way, that country was a lot more corrupt, it was a lot more authoritarian than Ukraine was. The same thing applied. We didn't learn the lessons of pre the Second World War. And, would I sign up if our country went to war? You're damn right I would. Because do you know what? At some point, you have to stand up for something on this planet, right? If I want to go through life and, Dave says, look, I'm from Essex. I grew up in pretty working class surroundings at times. Yeah, but at times you have to stand up for what is right. And there are some people that sound today like they wouldn't have got. They don't think it was right for us to go into the Second World War. That it would have been right to let Hitler march all across Europe unanswered, right up until he landed.
Also,
on
having
the
seen
shores of
how
Dover.
Vladimir Putin rules Russia, having seen what his troops have been ordered to do, it's not one-off, things. What they've been ordered to do in the Donbass region in Ukraine. I don't think that is. If that was happening in my country, that wouldn't be a country worth living in. I would absolutely fight. I'm an armchair general. I get that, but by the way, Vladimir Zelensky is not Vladimir Zelensky is not asking British people to spill their blood. Let's go to Jamie. He's on the line in Essex. Hello, Jamie.
Yes, hello, Julie.
Are you one of those working class lads who'd end up going off to war? Is that like Dave says?
Well, I'm a patriot. I grew up in Barking, live in Essex, and of course, if I was younger, I would fight for this country. But listen, I agree with you on pretty much everything. But I'm yet to be convinced on the argument with Ukraine. I mean, Trump is by his own admission not a politician. He is a businessman. And
He's a politician.
Yeah, I think that we need more people like Trump. His deal is not a bad one. What he's doing, he's saying. For Ukraine and it's not appeasing Putin. He's saying that he will have American interests in Ukraine with this mineral deal, and he will protect those interests and Ukraine equally. Putin won't like that. And what you're suggesting, and your colleague is an endless meat grinder. We all know how they can't win that war. Russia has got the largest population in the world. We know what happened in the Second World War. Over 20 million Russians died. They just keep throwing men at it, and I don't want young men to die. And the analogy between Russia and Germany, as far as I can see, is full of holes, because Russia is no longer a Soviet superpower. Look, for God's sake, it's having to buy weapons from Iran. It can't even take.
But you're almost arguing against yourself there, Jamie, because they're saying they're not a massive superpower. Look, if we'd gone in hard, for a start, we could have taken action and made it very, very, very clear that you step one steel toe cap into Ukraine and all hell breaks loose. He thought he'd get away with it because he got away with 2014 in the invasion in Crimea. Sanctions.
I'm no fan of Putin.
No, I'm not saying you are.
Vance said it quite clearly. The threat to us and America and to Europe isn't Russia anymore. That's when I grew up, it was the Cold War. They're no longer. The threat is from within now. And
I think it's both. It's both. We have made ourselves weak, but by making ourselves weak, Jamie, we have emboldened people like Vladimir Putin, because we and Xi Jinping, we don't stand up. And the Palestinian, the Hamases and the Hezbollah, we don't stand up for our values anymore.
And I agree with, like I say, I agree with you on everything, but I just don't like the idea that, there's already been up to 1 million deaths and casualties. How much longer? How many more young innocent?
Okay, well, isn't that up to the Ukrainian people?
Sorry?
Isn't that up to the Ukrainian people?
Well, we don't know, because there's not been an election. Maybe they don't want.
There's not been an election. Their leader's elected. Zelensky was elected. We didn't have. Funnily enough, we didn't have elections when we were at war in the Second World War. He's a democratically elected leader.
Yeah, but we had a war cabinet, which was a coalition of all parties. Zelensky, it's only his decision. Now, I don't agree. Look, Putin hasn't had an election in 25 years, so I don't.
Well, no, Putin has elections all the time, but the only people who stand against him get killed.
We all know what sort of elections there are, but the simple fact is, I don't think, along with many others, Russia is the threat it was when I was a young man. That there's no way in the world they're going to encroach into Western Europe.
You think not? Why do you think that Finland has 250,000 reservists? Why do you think that Latvia and the other Baltic states are massively upping their military ability? Why do you think Poland is? What do they know that we don't know?
Well, that's a fair point. Well, the alternative is that we up our spending on defence, and that we have to look after ourselves now. And but I can't say. Look, I'm in business. I've been in business for 30 years. I can see where Trump's coming on. It's not an appeasement of Putin. Putin won't like the fact that America is investing in Ukraine. And if it's and the fact is, if what I've read is true, that Biden gave all the money as a grant, whereas Europe did it as a loan, that's. I can understand Trump's point. You know, if we're going to give you something, we want something back in return.
No, but the whole point is he's not promising to give them anything in return. He says we want the mineral rights. Do we want the mineral rights for backdating for money that was given to help save Ukraine? I mean, again, I just don't understand why people don't get that stopping Putin is in our interest. Forget if you don't have to give two hoots about the Ukrainian people. It's about stopping a violent, dangerous dictator in his tracks. Jamie, I could do this all day. I so appreciate your call, sir. Thank you very much. If you'd like to get in touch, give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number. 11:32 is the time. We'll take a quick break. Up next, we're going to talk about the German elections and what does that teach us? The performance of the AfD coming second and doubling their vote in just one election cycle. What does that tell us about what Reform UK could do here? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:34 is the time. Let's talk right now about the German elections. Not something we often do. We often focus on the French elections, don't we? The presidential elections. We've had some very interesting parliamentary elections in France as well. And of course, we talk a lot about the Americans as well. Germany, not so much, which is strange because it is the powerhouse economy of Europe. Well, it used to be before net zero anyway. But the election result yesterday has indeed been what many are saying historic. We have seen basically the Labour Party there, the SPD, basically falling away. Olaf Scholz is no longer going to be Chancellor, but they'll still be in the government because there's going to be a grand coalition. It's going to be formed with the winning party, the CDU. That's the Conservative Party, effectively Angela Merkel's old party. They won that election. But crucially, the party that came in second place isn't getting a look in. Why? Because they're the Alternative for Deutschland, AfD. They won 20% of the vote. Astonishingly, doubling their vote in just one election cycle. But what lessons can be learned not just for Germany, but for British politics by all of that? Let's talk to a political theorist and professor at Webster University in Vienna. That's Dr. Ralph Schulhammer. A very good morning to you, Ralph.
Hey, Julia, great to be back on again.
Lovely to speak to you. Right then, well, look, let's get to it. First of all, just talk about what's going on in Germany. How significant is that election result, particularly for the AfD?
Well, let's start with the basics. I read many headlines that this was a shift to the right. It was not a shift to the right. The CDU-CSU, the Conservatives, you described it quite nicely in your intro. They got about 28% of the votes. The AfD got 20% of the votes. So together they have around 48, 49% of the vote. That's not a majority. Yeah. The current constellation is slightly more right-wing than it was 4 years ago, but this was not a massive shift to the right. Secondly, consider you go to the doctor and the doctor says, I'm gonna double your medication. The first thing you're going to ask is, well, is that going to have an effect? Yeah. And the same thing is happening in Germany. Yes, the German people decided to double the medication in form of the AfD, but 20% is not enough to affect structural change. Yeah. So for the next 4 years, we're going to have a center-left and center-right coalition between the Conservatives and the Social Democrats. And unfortunately, because they're ideologically so far apart from each other, not much is going to happen. If we have a minute later on, maybe we can also break down the demographics a little little bit of who voted for whom.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting, isn't it? Because it's certainly younger people voting for the AfD, which has been a very interesting development across a lot of European countries. But this thing, saying it's not a big shift to the right, but as a lot of people will be watching from here, are saying pretty much it's the same as when we go from Tory government to a Labour government and possibly to the Tory government, is actually you get pretty much the same policies. You're saying they actually are quite far apart on some policies, but they're actually not going to be able to agree on much. It's not going to be like the Tory Lib Dem coalition of 2010. They're basically going to just not get much done. But I'm not sure that's an option at a time when we are facing the threat from Putin. We've got the Islamofascism threat, when we are dealing with the collapse of the European economy due to net zero, something you and I have spoken many times about, the immigration crisis, the crime crisis. I'm not sure that's going to fly with many German voters.
Well, I think if we look also at the situation in the UK, the problem we have in Europe, if you look at the major countries, Germany, France and the United Kingdom, even though people have shown, or a significant number of people have shown their interest in true reforms and voting for new alternative parties, whatever we think about them in detail, but they showed a willingness to shift their votes, it was not enough to yet reach crucial mass.
Yeah.
So both in France, in Germany, and also I would argue in the UK, we are still stuck with the same old elites from yesteryear. And another factor that I found quite interesting in Germany, and I think the numbers are quite similar in the UK, the driving force that at the moment is preventing that change, and I'm going to get in hot water with saying that, it's women under 30. Women under 30 disproportionately vote for left and far left parties.
Yep.
And you mentioned net zero, you mentioned mass migration. These are usually the political movements that are behind or supportive of mass migration and net zero policies.
Yeah, again, they think of themselves as the nice people. That's what they think that. But it's interesting, in Germany, they've got this firewall system. So we're often told that for parties to break through, you need to have PR, because then, of course, you get that representation. We saw with Reform UK, all those votes and only 5 MPs in Parliament, although you can argue they're actually here for having rather more impact than many Conservatives are having in Parliament in Britain. But that firewall policy where basically no other party will deal with them, no other party will consider having talks for a coalition with them, means they're out of power. So again, I would say be careful what you wish for to Nigel Farage. I mean, he always wants to move towards PR. But let's talk about the AfD policies, because we talk about them as a far-right party. Now, you know, we've got an awful lot of supposedly mainstream people here, centrist people here, refer to Nigel Farage and Reform UK as far-right, but they're clearly abjectly, clearly not far-right. But the AfD does have some very nasty elements, some racist elements, which people are concerned about. But an awful lot of their policies would be very popular with most voters, would they not? Talk us through some of the highlights.
No, the point is, right, they would never be alone in government due to the political system in Germany.
Yeah.
So even if the CDU says we are conservatives and you guys are quote unquote far rightists, they can make conditions. For example, they can say you have certain politicians in the former East German provinces that are too far to the right.
Yeah.
They cannot play a role in federal politics, but others like Ms. Weidel, like Mr. Kruppalla, they're okay. They can play a role in federal politics. As you pointed out, you can say, okay, we can cooperate on your energy policies. We can cooperate on your deregulation policies. Germany does not, and neither does, of course, the UK. They're not voting for a dictator.
Yeah.
So this would have been a chance to say, we cooperate, we take you into a coalition, and we hem in the more radical elements of your party. Because here's the fun part about democracy. If that would have been a successful coalition, or still could be if Mr. Merz would jump over his shadow, that usually is the best recipe against radicalization.
Yes.
If people feel that things are getting better, they have no interest to vote for revolutionary politicians, because let's be honest, Julia, if you and I are doing well, the least thing we're interested in is a revolution.
Exactly.
So the best vaccination against revolutions is successful politics.
Well, exactly. I've been saying for years, people criticising the rise of other parties, like across Europe and even Donald Trump in America and Reform UK here. Here, you created this problem. If you feel it's a problem, it's entirely your doing. But in terms of some of their policies, they're anti-EU. Love that. In terms of the AfD, they are anti-mass uncontrolled immigration. Well, yeah, that's a majority view of most people in Europe and Britain and America. They are in favour of scrapping net zero policies, which is absolutely vital to the German economy, trying to go back to the sort of powerhouse it once was. They're talking about, when it comes to immigration, wide-scale deportations. Again, that's a policy for which Donald Trump very popular election. I mean, and they're not talking about sort of, oh, you've got brown skin, you have to leave. I mean, you know, that BNP style. I mean, they're talking about people who've got no right to be in the country, who've committed crimes, being forced to leave. I would hesitate to find someone sane who didn't think that was a good policy.
No, you're right, and they have been very clear about this. Even they have also very much softened their stance on leaving the European Union, right? They said this was something we said in the past, but we are willing to talk about it. They argue now that the European Union needs reform, and the European Union does need a reform. They said,
good luck with that.
As you correctly pointed out, they said that, of course, citizens with a migrant background and integrated immigrants are still welcome. They were also welcome to vote for the AfD, but, for example, criminals are not. And we had a situation in Germany, just to run the numbers. There were 5 terrorist attacks in the last 12 months, and all of them were committed by asylum seekers. So you're importing people that ask for your help, and then they go out and murder people with knives, cars, and what have you. I think it's fair to say that maybe you should revise your immigration policy, including the rights for asylum. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, the spate of attacks in Germany, in France, in Europe, other parts of Europe has been quite extraordinary. And again, I just don't understand how long politicians think people are going to go, oh, that's fine. Yeah, every time I go to a market, I'll just hope I come back alive. I mean, it's just not going to be acceptable to people anymore. What are the lessons for Reform UK? I know you spend a lot of time here in this country. You follow our politics very closely as well. What are the lessons for Nigel Farage and Reform UK from this election?
Well, I think the general lesson is that some major European country must find back to sanity. So apparently it was not the French, it was not the UK, if you look at Keir Starmer, and apparently it's not Germany. So this is really worrisome. And that's why I'm so disappointed in the German result, because I think if someone makes the first step, the others will start to follow along. I always said I like a lot of what Reform in the UK does. I have trust issues with Nigel Farage. He's sometimes I'm not sure how committed he really would be to let's say a reform program that he's promising. And sometimes I wonder if his personality does not get in the way of building coalitions. Now, again, I'm an unassimilated foreigner, and I would never dare to tell the British whom to vote for and whom not to vote for.
Not like Elon Musk telling people to vote for the AfD.
Farage is a good speaker. I think he puts the finger on the right place. He knows what the problems are, but then he kind of sometimes dilly-dallies around and goes back and forth. So, and I think many of the people in his party that I liked quite a bit, like, Ben Habib and others, it's very sad that they could not find some kind of compromise to keep other interesting figures in his party. So he's, as an interesting, good speaker. I like him. I'm sure he's great fun to have a beer with. But will he be the man to make the course correction?
That's very interesting. But again, the smaller parties need to have charismatic figures to even, get on anybody on board with them. But then you should say that can sometimes hold them back. That's very interesting analysis. Ralph Scholhammer, thank you very much. Always so good to talk to you. Thank you. Sam Armstrong, look, you're a Conservative commentator. You're a member of the Conservative Party. What do you think the lessons are to be learned from what's happened in Germany? Very different political system, lots of different things going on. But in terms of the AfD getting to 20%, what's the lesson?
Well, the first lesson is it is no longer just possible to ignore the concerns of working people election after election, government after government, and expect them not to turn around and run off somewhere else.
You don't own those votes.
The message is so clear around the world. It's just not possible anymore, right? You can blame that on the internet, you can blame that on social media, or you can accept the fact that, as I do, that actually some of the lies that you were telling to people, some of the kind of papering over the cracks, just doesn't wash it when mass migration reaches this scale, or the costs of net zero reach the scale that we're now talking about there. But the biggest warning light through all of these results should be the way that young men around Europe, across the West, are now voting. And Ralph's right to say young men and young women are now voting very, very differently. For the first time, I think ever, the biggest split will come down in gender in how people are voting.
And we see that in America as well, Donald Trump.
Hugely so. But there's a huge warning here for the Conservative Party, which is if the AfD can do it over there, why do you think you're going to be the exception over here? Nigel Farage isn't the AfD, and as a result, he's at 30%, not 20%. But those numbers are sticky. Those numbers are the way the situation's going to be. So either you start taking the serious concerns of working class people and putting those and really showing that you believe them and are prepared to do what is necessary to deliver them, or for the lesson for the Conservative Party, we don't have PR. You're not able to shut them out with the Labour Party. You're not going to get into government, and we're going to see a very messy result next time, in which I fear, as I've said many times on this show, that Keir Starmer is going to slide back in next time. But the election after next, boy, there we could be seeing a very, very shocking result for this country.
And especially after what we see, say, with the French presidential election with Marine Le Pen as well. It's going to be absolutely... I mean, I think we thought we had Keir Starmer elected, it was going to be really boring 4 years. Nope. Turns out not. All right, up next, though, we are going to be talking about that, I think, absolutely brilliant email on behalf of Doge and Elon Musk, asking every American government employee, can you account for what you did last week? 5 bullet points. What did you actually do at work last week? Or, if you don't want to reply, that's fine. We'll consider you to have resigned from your job. Don't we need a bit of that over here? I wonder if most of our civil servants could make a list of 5 things they did last week other than walk the dog while they pretended to be on a Zoom. We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let me put this question to you and indeed to Sam Armstrong. What did you achieve at work? What were your accomplishments in the last week? Can you put them in 5 bullet points? And if you don't, by the end of tonight, midnight, I'll assume you have resigned from your job. Could you do that? What would those 5 bullet points be? Sam Armstrong, do you think that's a reasonable email to have been sent on behalf of HR of each department in the US administration? Basically, they all got this email, but it's at the behest of Elon Musk and his Doge, his Department of Government Efficiency, basically saying, what have you got done at work in the past week?
You know, I find mad. Why is this surprising?
Why is
it remarkable? Why is it not the case that most employees are asked periodically, what is it that you've been doing at work? What are your responsibilities? What are you doing there? And why isn't it reasonable for when a new ownership, like when a company's bought out, you'd see the new management come in and they'd say, right, what do you do? What do you do? Yep. And have a little look. Oh, can we reorganise this? Can we make some efficiencies there? These are basic everyday events in business in this country, despite our madly restrictive employment laws. But it seems that the public sector workers again and again see themselves as an exception to what everybody else has put up with their entire career.
Some of the American trade union bodies, they've said this is targeted harassment, this is bullying. It's quite extraordinary. I'd love to know what you think about this. 0344 499 1000. Let's find out also what Ewan McCaughey thinks. He's a professor of law at King's College London, specialising in labour law and corporate governance. Very good morning to you, Ewan.
Morning.
Could you account for what you did last week, and is it reasonable for an employer to ask?
No, and we don't have extraordinarily restrictive labour laws in the UK. We've got some of the most liberal laws for employment in the world. Only America has lower standards than we do. And an instruction to account for what you've done or be fired would be flatly unlawful in any country that respects the rules.
Why would it be unreasonable for your employer? Why not? If your employer asks you, can you let me know what you've done last week? I'm not talking about dissertation, 5 bullet points. If you can't respond, if your employer asks you to send him or her information, surely you're required to do that as part of your contract, and it's reasonable information. So why would that be unlawful?
Well, it's not asking what's been done, but it's the threat to fire somebody for not replying to an email that would be unlawful. So there's a difference between dismissal for gross misconduct, for instance, or minor breaches, which could lead to a warning, for example. And I mean, your viewers must hear that people at the FBI and employees at the Department of Justice have been instructed to not follow Musk's ludicrous instructions.
Wait a minute, you say ludicrous, like individual departments basically saying, look, don't reply, we'll sort it out. And that's obviously, they didn't know about this email in advance. It came to sort of as if it was an HR department. But like, he wasn't saying you'll be fired. He's saying the same as the decree, effectively. He's basically saying, you work from home, you're no longer working from home, back in the office on this date, or we'll consider you to have resigned. That's not the same as saying you're fired. That's just saying those are the terms and conditions of your employment. If you don't like them, well, adios. But that's not firing people. That's saying if you don't want to do the job on the terms in which you've been hired, and I'm thinking turning up to the office when you're told to, as you used to have to do, and telling your boss what it is you actually got done last week, a perfectly reasonable request. I would consider that you should consider yourself to have resigned.
No, and you wouldn't be able to persuade any court in a Western democracy the distinction that you're making.
Why?
So they are saying you're fired. And it's outrageous because if you really want to fix all the problems that America has, it's got some of the highest child poverty in the Western world. It's got extraordinary levels of homelessness. Life expectancy is stagnating because the healthcare system is broken. It costs far more than anywhere else in the world. And you have billionaires who are unelected, like Elon Musk, trying to destroy the public sector.
No, sorry. I'm sorry, Ewan. Sorry. He's unelected. He's not actually in the cabinet, but the American cabinet under their constitutional system is appointed, not elected. None of the cabinet members are elected. It's a ridiculous point. It's just a billionaire you don't like.
Well, no, I think that the important point is that it's the American people that don't like him. But
really? Because I'm hearing
if I could just finish a sentence. He gave $277 million to Donald Trump to get elected. America has gone off the spectrum in the degree to which the billionaire class controls politics and controls the media, just like this television station is also controlled by a billionaire. You can't have a free and open debate. You can't have a free media. You can't have a functioning democracy when money dominates everything.
Okay.
And I think that's something really important.
Ewan, I can absolutely tell you, this station is owned by Rupert Murdoch, and I 100% assure you, and I'm happy to say this to his face, he does not control anything that I say or anything my guests say, ever.
Well,
I wouldn't work for him on that basis. So that's incredibly insulting of you to suggest that I would. Can I just go back to you? But
I
let you finish your point.
The fact that billionaires control our media.
I hate to tell you, Ewan, billionaires have controlled everything for a very long time. Were you very upset when Sam Altman gave hundreds of millions to the Democrats?
I don't think that this is a particularly productive conversation.
Well, I'm sorry, Ewan, I'm trying to have a conversation about whether or not people should be able to answer an email from their boss. You're the one who's turned it into, I don't like Elon Musk, he's a billionaire, it must be a bad thing. I don't want big money in our politics at all. If it was up to me, no organisation, no individual could give more than £5,000 or £10,000 because I wouldn't want that influence because they listen to those people. However, it is irrelevant that Elon Musk is unelected because everyone who works in American government other than the president in the executive is unelected. So other than the vice president. So sorry, I hate to tell you, I might actually know something about this as well as you. But that's a silly point to make. It's an irrelevant point. Here's the thing. What is unreasonable? Take out the will consider yourself to have resigned point. What is unreasonable about asking people who are paid for by taxpayers, they don't get to choose, like, I'll go to that supermarket or that supermarket. They don't get to choose the civil servants, the people in government whose wages they pay through their taxes. What is unreasonable about asking those people to account for what they do? Because I've worked in a lot of organisations, and I think there are an awful lot of people who do absolutely, technical term, bugger all day.
Well, I think what's unreasonable is Elon Musk paying $277 million to buy his way into control of the US government. It's unreasonable that Elon Musk companies have been given
Ewan, answer the question I asked you.
In contracts and subsidies since 2008
it's
from the US
irrelevant.
government. And now
that's irrelevant.
He's going to use his position to enrich himself.
That's irrelevant.
And that's not
answer the
sort of
question
way that
I
we want
actually
the rest of
asked
the
you.
world
I
to
didn't
go.
ask your views on the American political system. I asked your views on the employment situation. What is wrong with an employer asking employees what they've done?
At the beginning of this conversation, you asked the same question. I'm just going to give you the same answer, which is that it's the threat to fire somebody for not replying to an email.
And I'm going to make the point again.
And I hope that that's not the way that you would expect any employer to work. I mean,
I said take out.
Real degradation of standards if we treat people
Asked to Ewan. I said ignoring the side of the threat resignation of you resigned yourself or threat of firing. What would be unreasonable?
That's the most important thing, isn't it?
I said you've made that point twice. Ignoring that side of things, is it unreasonable for an employer to say, "Can you account for what you did last week?"
Yeah, so I guess it's the third time now, it's okay to ask what people have been doing last week.
And should you be required to answer that?
I'm not
I don't
really
think that's
sure
a difficult question. No. Should an employee, you're saying they shouldn't be fired for it or considered to be resigned. Should they be facing some sort of discipline, first warning, whatever it is, for not replying to that email and saying, yeah, I did this, and this?
Yeah, so if you're an employer, you have a general right to direct what employees do within the limits of the law and if you're acting in good faith. But this sort of operation that is
Elon Musk,
going on in America at the moment is plainly exploitative. People shouldn't have to work under these conditions, and America is crumbling at the seams.
Yeah, I think America's crumbling at the seams because they're trillions in debt, because they're spending a fortune on stuff and no one knows what they're spending it on. And if you've got a couple of million employees, you don't know what the hell most of them are doing all day. Maybe that's worth investigating. But you know what? Elon Musk is a billionaire and you don't like his views, so it must be a bad thing and exploitative. Ewan, I wish we could have got further with that conversation, but we just kept going round in circles. Ewan McCaughey, Professor of Law at King's College London. I'd hate to ask him what he got done last week, Sam.
Yeah, I could take a guess, but look, I think we respect everyone that comes on this show.
I'm going to have a look at his Twitter and see what flags he's got in his bio. I bet I can guess. Oh, that was fun. Do give us a call. Your thoughts on that, your thoughts on Ukraine as well. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. I've been led to believe that my last guest was not very happy with that interview. I mean, as I imagine you weren't very happy with that interview with Ewan McCaughey, because apparently he seems to think me asking questions is utterly unreasonable, and asking questions about Doge and asking government employees in America to answer a simple question about what they've actually got done in the last week. Apparently it's all to do with Elon Musk is a billionaire and he's given lots of money, and I'm a Murdoch puppet. I don't know. I think that's where it went, didn't it, Sam Armstrong?
Crazy, crazed conspiracy theories. They're seeing these webs of influence everywhere. And look, he was just as unhappy with you asking him a basic question as he is about employees being asked, what have they done this week? Of course, he's a university professor where no doubt his research is well funded by our taxes.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to talk to all comers, don't I? Yeah. Jamie, I had a. Before I tell you what's happening in this set, I just want to get. I had a job years back. I was a news reporter on the in the Evening Standard, and the new editor came and joined, and I think Sir Simon Stevens, I think his name was, and he asked. We went around the building, and he basically said, "Hello, I'm the new editor. What do you do?" And people would say, "Well, I'm the deputy picture editor on the Diary or something." He said, "No, I didn't ask you what your job title was. I asked you what you do." And then he'd be like, well, I'd get the picture together. And I remember the classic one for the Evening Standard is this Londoner's Diary, and it's the gossip column and all the things. And he said, would you do? Well, I do the pictures for the gossip column. Okay, so how many pictures? Like 4 a day. So 4 pictures of famous people a day on one page. How often do you change the edition? Or, once or twice, a couple of pictures. So basically, you have to find 6 pictures of famous people for every day. Like, that's not a proper job, right? He's not taking the photos himself. He's getting them out of the library, or they've been sent in that day. I mean, and he basically went, you could see him going, okay, that's not a job, next. There are lots of people who do something like, what is your job title is irrelevant. What do you actually do all day?
And an employer has to ask that question, because do you know what?
Especially when they're being paid for by our taxes.
It's vanishingly rare that an employee sticks up his hand and says, yeah, by the way, I've got nothing to do, I don't do anything, you could probably get away without me.
No, I've done that in a couple of temp jobs, and I'm literally, I finished everything, and everyone looks at you like, shush! Yeah. Don't say anything! Yeah. Honestly, no.
Elon's coming, look busy.
Yeah. Oh, I'm telling you, looking busy is exhausting. It really is. Anyway, I'm going to say, I just talk on the radio, so it doesn't really count. Yeah, I know, it's a great gig. Anyway, coming up on the show, whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, on your connected device, it is great to have your company, and it's great to get so many calls. After we talk to our next guest, we're going to get some more of your calls on air. 0344 499 1000. Simple question. Who do you trust most on Ukraine? Is it Trump? Is it Zelensky? Or is it Putin? You can text on 87222, put a message on X at Talk TV, even though it does belong to Elon Musk. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost 1 standard network rate message. Bearing in mind there is a wrong answer. I'm taking on all comers today. We are going to be talking more about that on the 3rd anniversary of the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine back in 2022. Now, also, Zelensky saying that, I'm going to call Trump's bluff, and I will stand down as Ukrainian president. Not a dictator. I'll stand down as Ukrainian president in return for peace and NATO membership for his country to guarantee that peace. What do you make of that? Also going to be talking about the fat jabs. I've been saying since they were first in the news, these are not going to be safe. There are always side effects for every jab and every treatment. 82 Brits have died from using, after using weight loss jabs such as Ozempic and Mounjaro. The NHS has warned people, don't take the jabs unless you really need them, unless you're also prescribed them by your doctor. Also, we're going to be talking about the extraordinary case of a grandmother visited by Manchester police officers after she posted comments, nothing illegal, nothing abusive, nothing incendiary, on Facebook, criticising Labour councillors in that WhatsApp group that caused the Labour Minister Andrew Gwynn to resign. The Thought Police are truly alive and well. And we're going to be talking about the BBC, as Tory leader Kemi Badenoch has demanded to know if BBC licence fee cash was given to Hamas terrorists during the making of a controversial documentary about Gaza that featured the son of a Hamas official. All that coming up, plenty more besides. Sam Armstrong's still with me, of course. I'm delighted to welcome to the show right now Mesa Given. He's a former British volunteer with the Ukrainian army. He also fought against ISIS in Syria. Mesa, thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon.
I appreciate this. Now, I got a caller a little bit earlier, and I put this question. Who do you trust most on Ukraine? Is it Donald Trump, Zelensky, or Vladimir Putin? And one of our callers made the very fair point. Well, are you going to, get your camouflage kit on and go and fight? Is Sam going to go and fight? You send your children to go and fight. It's all very well being an armchair general, but, you actually have done that yourself. Who do you trust most on Ukraine?
Zelensky. And the truth is, Zelensky is the democratically elected leader of Ukraine, a sovereign European nation that's been brutally invaded by a dictatorship. Putin has rolled back any notion of democracy in his own country. He's butchered people in Ukraine. He's persecuted gay people in Russia. He's destroyed any opposition to his rule. Donald Trump has this sort of mercantile view of international relations. He is very much America first, Britain last, Europe last, indeed everyone who's non-American last, which he's entitled to do.
He's entitled
to do. I was just about to say. Yet at the same time, I find it quite frustrating to see Brits putting all their faith in Donald Trump when we as a country will actually suffer for many of his decisions, not just on the economy, but also on his views on international relations. If we want to be a bold, ambitious, great country again ourselves, we need to be supporting countries like Ukraine. This is about Britain and not American foreign policy.
Yeah, and this is the interesting thing. And again, we in Europe need to care a bit more about the security of Europe than countries on the other side of the Atlantic. Although, of course, it is also in America's best interest, actually, long term, for us to have that bulwark against an autocratic and dangerous dictator like Vladimir Putin. Why do you think Donald Trump seems to think that Putin's an okay guy? He said he's a man, that he could trust, and he's had he's had a number of meetings where, no officials present, no one taking a record. Is he, as some suggest, has Putin got compromised him? Is he basically an agent for Vladimir Putin, as conspiracy theorists would say, or does he just admire him as a strong man and wish he had the same sort of power?
Oh, no, I think at the end of the day, we are entering a new phase of our civilization, and also as mankind, I should really say, i.e. The sort of peace dividend that we have enjoyed for so many years after the fall of the Soviet Union is now well and truly over. America is no longer, or is conceding now, that it's no longer the sole dominant superpower of the world. And the narrative that's been going on for a long time, pushed by Russia and China, that we live in a multipolar world, which is basically a balkanized world where there are power centers and regional power centers that exist. I think Donald Trump is starting to admit that. But what frustrates me is it's America admitting to its decline, essentially. They're no longer willing to fight for Europe. Yeah. They want to pivot their attention to Asia to counter the rise of China. And in doing so, they're going to throw to the wolves their long-term allies. Yeah. It is a wake-up call for us as Britain, and also as Europeans too. And we need to be investing in our defense. We cannot rely on the United States to defend us. There are growing powers in Russia and China, and we need to do more to counter those.
And I appreciate that wake-up call. And by the way, Donald Trump delivered that wake-up call back in 2016, 2017, and they chose to ignore him, didn't they? I mean, you could argue really that a lot of people, a lot of sort of hand-wringing sort of centrists were all like, peace is the norm, war is separation. It's not. The last 30 years after the Cold War, and the sort of peace dividend, not everywhere, but largely, certainly where the Westerners were concerned, that has been the aberration. And these power blocks and competing national and economic and geographic interests and battles for vital resources, whether it's minerals or oil or water, we're told is going to be the one in the future. That is more the norm. That is the norm, Absolutely. Not what we've been going through in recent decades.
No, absolutely. And to be honest with you, I did not vote to leave the EU. I wanted for Britain to leave the EU. I was actually fighting against the Islamic State at the time and missed the referendum, but would have voted. My ambition for Britain, as Winston Churchill once said, if it was a choice between Europe and the open sea, always choose the open sea. And if Britain is going to make a success of Brexit, if it's going to stride confidently into the future as a world power, as a country that is still globally significant, I don't like to see people do this country down. I see it a lot online. We need to be engaging in countries like Ukraine. Ukraine is an ally of the UK. It is a country with vast potential, and our growing alliance with them is absolutely in our interest, both politically, economically, militarily, and everything else. So pushing back against Vladimir Putin is vital to our national interest.
Yeah, that's the thing. When people, I completely agree with you on that. That people think, well, we're just helping little old Ukraine out. Ukraine, as you say, a very significant country, and we know from the wheat supplies, the sunflower oil, the fertilizer, everything else. It's absolutely a really significant country. It's one of the reasons why it's been fought over so much, and why Vladimir Putin wants it so badly. But in terms of look, I'm not a conspiracy theorist about people's views. I think when someone says to me, "Oh, you only say that because someone's paying you to say that," no, I just give my views and I think most people do. But nevertheless, a lot of the stuff that people will say when they're critical of Zelensky, "Oh, we did that Vogue cover," "Oh, we call her earlier saying, oh, he's travelling around the world, the globe, instead of sitting in his bunker," or corruption and things, seems to me are Kremlin talking points. This is stuff that the Kremlin is putting out online. Those little bots everywhere, these talking points, their little busy bees are online, and they're pushing these points, and they are being parroted again and again by people in this country, in America, and even by the man who sits in the Oval Office at the White House. Why? I mean, how and why does that happen? That this narrative has become so strong and has basically taken over the American president?
Well, it shows you how vulnerable we are in the West. So Russia has always played to its strengths. It is a country that was severely diminished after the fall of the Soviet Union. They don't have the resources to invest to compete with the United States and other major world powers. So they've invested in certain areas. The rise of Wagner Group under Prigozhin, the rise of these troll farms and the use of disinformation. He basically saw an opportunity in Western democracy, which has a free press and everything else, to exploit and to divide the West. One of my frustrations with the extreme left in the West over the last few years is the rise of this. We are so polarized because of the so-called cultural war that we've got into that has distracted us from the rise of China and Russia and some genuine autocracies and brutal regimes. And these regimes have actually utilized that against us. They have divided us. They've funded certain people online. There's been a lot of cases in the United States in particular where people have been receiving money, sometimes unaware that they're receiving Russian money for the things that they say. And so this is a deliberate ploy by China and Russia to exploit our weaknesses in the West. So we need to wake up to that fact. And what frustrates me is it's up to our political leadership to first of all wake us up to that growing threat, but also reiterate and reaffirm and to tell us why it's in our national interest to be supporting Ukraine and to be standing up for ourselves on the global stage. We've got weak leadership in Britain and in the West generally. We haven't articulated the course to people on the streets, and we need to be doing more, because at the end of the day, we are sleepwalking into a crisis, and that crisis is a growing sort of reality that there is a axis of evil on this planet that does want to see the decline of our civilization in the West, of democracy, of freedom of speech, that sort of stuff, to their own benefits. And they're doing everything they can to exploit our weaknesses. So we need to double down and fight back.
Here to all of that, Mesa Gifford, thank you very much indeed. Former British volunteer with the Ukrainian Army, like us sitting in this studio, Sam Armstrong, he put his money where his mouth is, and he goes, I'm in awe of people like him who go and, risk their own lives like that for a battle, Again, and I think the threat from Putin, threat from China, and also, that threat from Islamofascism, ISIS, Hamas, Hezbollah, all of that. The West it's just been sleepwalking, hasn't it?
Yeah, but what I think Mesa speaks to is actually the fact that these may be conflicts politics in a land far away, of which we know
Not
little.
that far.
But actually, in actual fact, the freedoms that Mason was talking about defending are our own. He recognises the fact that, you know, in order to protect ourselves in Europe, we must draw a line which says you can't go rampaging round European countries taking over them, because we've seen how that record ends before. And in order to stand up to Islamofascism, you have to kill it wherever it exists. And I say kill it believably.
Oh, I mean quite literally. No, I mean quite literally kill it.
Exactly so, because these people will stop at nothing until they have destroyed everything that we hold dear. You can't just, in this world that we live in now, in which people can get around remarkably quickly, you can't just ignore things, because if you let it fester, it grows. It's
and
like
singing
gangrene.
Kumbaya,
Deal with it.
Singing Kumbaya and being all nicey about everything is all, and let's just have some talks and some negotiations. It's actually just not how the world actually works in the real world. Let's go to some of your calls though, because I've been asking, who do you trust most on Ukraine? Donald Trump, President Zelensky, or President Putin? Do you give us a call, 0344 499 1000. I'll get some of your texts and tweets as well. But Richard's on the line in Glasgow. Hello, Richard.
Hello, Julia.
Hello, what do you want to say, my love?
I just want to say, as a young person, I think your last caller was completely right. Britain needs to take the global stage and actually stand up for itself and not just capitulate to Donald Trump, because since the Suez crisis, we've seen much capitulating to America does for this country. Let's be honest, we are not as significant as we were in my grandfather's lifetime, in my father's lifetime. What is it going to be like in my child's lifetime, my grandchildren's lifetime?
I mean, we are going to be. Look, we had an empire. We ruled most of the world. We're not going to be significant, but we are still a player. We're still the National Security Council. We've still got a big economy. We've got a navy. Yeah.
If we capitulate to America, and this is where Keir Starmer's the Prime Minister needs to decide, is he actually going to draw a line in the sand, unlike other Prime Ministers? Are they going to capitulate to American foreign interest, or as a member of NATO, are we going to stand by the principles of the North Atlantic Treaty and decide what is the future of this country? Is it capitulating to tyrants across the world?
Yeah, but we can only do that if we've got enough military might and will to actually defend ourselves and defend our allies. And right now, we don't, Richard. Thank you so much for your call. Really appreciate that. Because some of the other text messages before we go to another quick call. Omar says, when I ask who do you trust most on Ukraine, he goes, I don't trust any of them. Susie says, I trust Trump. Certainly not Putin. Would never trust Zelensky. He's as corrupt as Putin. I just don't know where people get this from. Panama Papers. I mean, if you're going to talk about corruption, I mean, you could argue about Donald Trump, for goodness sake. Major question marks about what he's done over the years with his companies. Fraser says, why do I have to trust any of them? Real politics is not about trust, it's about interest. Very good point. And says Zelensky, obviously, his country has faced an illegal invasion. What do you expect him to do? Not fight back? Trump is so wrong on this. Darren says he trusts Trump. We're living through crazy times. He is the man to lead us through those times. William says Trump wants mineral rights. Putin wants sovereignty. And Zelensky is the democratically elected leader of Ukraine. Zelensky and the vast majority of Ukrainians want to protect Ukraine's right and desire to remain sovereign and independent. So Zelensky, of course, he says. Thomas says, in terms of trust, he trusts Trump, then Putin, and then Zelensky in that order. Thomas, if you're still listening, I think genuinely, that's an absurd, and I would say awful thing to think. I mean, I really do think that's extraordinary that you would think that you'd trust Putin over. I mean, again, no one's pretending Zelensky. I mean, he's been deified, hasn't he, in the last 3 years? He's not a little god. He's not, he's not perfect. No one's pretending that. They really are. But I mean, you trust Putin. Putin literally has murdered people who stand against him in government. I'm not sure. Does Zelensky do that? I don't know. Pretty sure he doesn't. Let's go to another call. 0344 499 1000 is the number that Dan has called, and he's in Portsmouth. Hello, Dan.
Hello, Julia.
Hey, what do you want to say?
I was speaking. Yeah, you've said again and again today. You've used a phrase that I was interested in about fighting for your country, and I wondered what you meant. A rhetorical question I'd ask would be, what does that mean? What does fighting for your country mean? To me, fighting for your country, unless somebody's actually knocking on the doorstep and coming in on across the channel. Fighting for your country means defending your way of life.
Yeah.
Right, and I would say to I'm too old to go fighting, so I'm probably out of the equation. But I'd say to any young people, particularly people I loved, why on earth would you want to go and defend a way of life that our government isn't defending? I've been to Russia. I've been to Russia. It's not such a base. It's actually all right.
Is it? Unless you criticise the government.
No, I personally if the choice came to it, would rather live under a Russian regime than an Islamic dictatorship, which is what this country has been in 50 years.
Yeah, those. Okay, I'll choose.
If we carry on giving our way of life away, and immigration and birth rates alone say that the natural conclusion is this country will end up being an Islamic country. We're giving our life.
Okay, I would choose.
You're suggesting we fight for away. So
I would choose Putin.
A young man want to go and die for it.
Okay, I would choose living under Putin than I would under the mullahs. Yeah, and Hezbollah or Hamas or that. Yeah, I accept that. Okay, here's the thing. I mean, look, I'm not carrying a weapon right now. I'm not losing, walking on a landmine and losing a limb when I'm sitting in the studio. We here at Talk are trying to fight for that way of life, fight for those values, fight for what this country should be standing for, and I think what most British people want and believe in. We try and do that every single day just by speaking out. We get criticised all the time for it. Now, that is a very, very, very small price to pay for standing up for democratic values and liberal values. I'm not facing someone blowing me up for doing it. I mean, although let's face it, the blasphemy laws we pretty much are de facto we are facing that. But would I pick up a weapon and kill someone or risk my death to protect the basic values of my country if they were under immediate threat? Hell yes.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, so would I. But what I'm saying is,
it's not worth.
Why would you do it when the portrayal and the direction of travel is our own government and successive governments are giving that away at a rate of
They are, but I don't think that's going to carry on because I think there are enough people now who've woken up and they're saying enough is enough. Sod the government. I wouldn't fight for the government, but I'd fight for my fellow British people and our rights and our values.
No, I disagree. And one thing, and to answer the question, to be kind enough to answer the question, you actually ask people to answer.
Who do you trust?
Who they trust. But the answer is I don't know. But what I would say is I don't trust really any of them. If why aren't we getting on? If this is such a catastrophe coming down the road, why aren't we getting on a war footing? And being on a war footing means your food. You have your own food. You have your own energy.
Dan, I'll tell you why. Because our leaders, one and all, are absolutely abjectly useless, and that is why we need to talk about this stuff. Dan, I so appreciate your call. Thank you very, very much indeed. 12:23 is the time. Going to take a quick break, and up next we're going to talk to the very brilliant Carl Hennigan about those fat jabs. Turns out 82 deaths have been linked to the weight loss jabs. I told you they weren't safe, didn't I? This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam Armstrong's still with me as well. I'd love to get your thoughts on what our next guest has to say. And this is about the fat jabs. Oh, they've been in the news solidly, haven't they, for the past year or so? And all these celebrities saying how wonderful they are, and editorials in newspapers, on TV shows saying how brilliant these fat jabs are, not just for losing weight, everyone's healthier. Well, let's put the whole country on fat jabs. They're absolutely brilliant. Ozempic, Mounjaro, you name it, they're all wonderful. And, you know, there's no side effects until there started being side effects, when people actually started talking about those side effects. And now, according to the front page of The Sun, some 82 Brits have died after using weight loss and diabetes jabs like Ozempic and Mounjaro. These are the official figures from the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency. And they revealed they're told just up to the end of January, and given how much they've exploded in the last few months, we may be seeing more reports. But are they safe? Are they not safe? Let's talk about this with Carl Hennigan. He's Professor of Evidence-Based Medicine at the University of Oxford. Good afternoon to you, Carl.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thanks so much for joining us. I remember talking to you the first time when these drugs came out, and everyone said, oh, these are brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant. Everyone loses weight. They weren't brilliant. There's no side effects. And even if you don't lose weight, you're healthier. And I remember thinking, I wonder if that's true, because funnily enough, the issue of pharmaceutical companies being honest has come up quite a lot in recent years. And when there is so much money at stake, and we are talking about billions and billions of pounds of worth of these drugs, and the possibility of putting millions of people in every Western country on these drugs, there's a strong incentive for pharmaceutical companies to be, should we say, economical with the truth. So how much danger is there for people using these drugs?
Yeah, you're right, Julie. I think the last time we spoke was when Wes Streeting said it's going to be a game changer for the unemployed, and that was last year. So you're right, 82 deaths, 22 of those were people taking it for weight loss and 60 for type 2 diabetes. But one interesting aspect about this, I'll come to the adverse event. The Sun says about 500,000 Brits are taking the medications. So I've been on to look at the prescribing data, and my analysis says that actually about 260,000 prescription items are out there. They've gone through the roof, these drugs. So it's about £26 million a month, in excess of 300 million. So although we've had 82 deaths, you can expect to see more. So like the Mounjaro one has gone from nowhere in March to 125,000 prescriptions by December 24. So I expect this number to get greater. The second thing is that the disparity between the 500,000 the Sun's reporting and the 260 million the 260,000 that are in the prescription data. One of the key concerns is that people are buying this online, not getting any advice, and actually buying it on a website. Falsified products, that's been an alert, and issues they don't understand the side effects. You can get diarrhea, vomiting, nausea. About 1 in 15 people stop taking the drug because of that. But about 1 in 10 will have a serious adverse effect, particularly things like dehydration and renal damage, because you've got all that diarrhea, you feel nauseous, you're not taking enough fluid on board. So it's incredibly important you stay well hydrated with these.
But that's the thing, we were told, weren't we, oh, these are all, you know, there's no serious side effects. But even in this study, which was, you know, put out, the actual trials that the drug companies did, they showed there were adverse effects. They also showed, and I thought this was what was so funny, it was actually, what was just visible, was actually how little weight loss there is for most people. You know, suppose only 70% of people actually lose weight, but actually the amount of weight that, say, a 20-stone person would lose in an average year is just the equivalent of losing half a pound a week. I can lose half a pound a week by missing breakfast.
So you're right, the biggest issue that any weight loss, all weight loss strategies work while you're on that short-term period, is how do you keep the weight off when you stop the intervention? And the thing is with these drugs like Ozempic, NICE says after 2 years you shouldn't be on them anymore, and most people will regain their weight by year 4 and 5 unless they make lifestyle changes. Now, if you remember, post-pandemic, I think it was Boris was going to have a big drive on obesity, a big public health campaign. It's completely disappeared off the agenda. Why? Because these magic bullets are great for the industry. They are going to make the industry that make them billions of pounds, and at the end of it we're going to look round and say, look at how many adverse events, how many harms have introduced, but also this biggest issue of falsified medicines and people bypassing prescriptions and getting it online.
You need to have the advice, and again, crucially, you've got to change. This is the opportunity to change your eating habits, your relationship with food, and your diet generally. But that's the thing. So NHS bosses have said you don't get this online. You've got to be doing this under the care of a doctor who's seen you directly. But also they're saying you shouldn't take these jabs unless you really need them. So there's that trade-off of there may be adverse effects, but the impact of your obesity is such that has a big adverse effect. But I know a lot of people who, frankly, have got a little bit of a tummy, and don't want to just give up, the odd donut or slice of pizza, who are using these drugs. That can't be a good thing.
I want to give you one important message that is not coming across as well. The women of childbearing age should be on contraception if they take these medications, and at least 2 months after. They are avoided in pregnancy because they're toxic in animal studies. So anybody out there listening who is of childbearing age, you need to be on a contraceptive because they are toxic in pregnancy and completely contraindicated.
That is terrifying. But also, by the way, if you're taking the contraceptive pill and you've got diarrhoea, your contraceptive pill is not going to work.
Yeah, correct. So there are huge issues. The other one as well, believe it or not, is if you're driving, the advice is not to drive because they cause dizziness. So there are lots of issues here that actually people are taking them and they're not. The message is not there from a public health perspective on the issues at hand. That's why you must see a doctor and you must get the right advice, and please don't get these online, whatever you do.
But also, you could just eat less and exercise more, which also works. Carl Hennigan, always good to talk to you. Professor of Evidence-Based Medicine at University of Oxford. Sam Armstrong. Now, I said from word go, I did not trust that these drugs would be without side effects. I don't think they're the answer. They, again, like all of these, it's a faddy thing. I know lots of people have lost weight. Oh my God, virtually every national newspaper columnist, woman's going, oh, look, I was this way, I've lost all this weight. Yeah, and you're going to be on it for life. I just don't think we should genuinely be on drugs for life.
Well, here's the thing I would say about this industry is we both know so many people that are on these drugs that are getting them on online pharmacies. And look, for some of them, I suspect, they're capable of handling it. But I also know of, somebody that I know who went on them a little bit pudgy, has stayed on them, and now she looks like she's a sort of shriveled prune. And my one fear, though, is that pushing so many people down this non-NHS route is that a lot of people are making the decisions themselves. And we know that especially women in particular, will go on them and they just won't know when to stop. And I suspect we're a couple of years away, actually, from seeing, proper Ozempic-based or Mounjaro-based anorexia really hitting
they'll be banned. I'm telling you, I'm just... How many times do we have to see this? And again, why do you think the pharmaceutical companies are telling us the truth? I'm sorry, I don't know why. There's too much money at stake. I don't know how many times we can see the same story again and again. There is a really simple, healthy and completely free way of losing weight in a healthy, sustainable way. And it does work. It really does. There's going to be some breaking news, by the way, just while we were talking with Carl Hennigan. The MP, Mike Amesbury, former Labour MP, sitting as an independent since being stripped of the whip, he has, in the last couple of minutes, been jailed for 10 weeks at Chester Magistrates Court. He admitted punching a man in the street in Frodsham in Cheshire last October. Quite extraordinary scenes, actually. But he pleaded guilty to that, and he has just now been sentenced to 10 weeks at Chester Magistrates Court. Sam, implications of this, look, realistically, I think with Timmy, does he have to stand down as an MP? Can there be a recall? Well, there definitely will be a recall petition, and in which case, how does that seat go?
Yeah, well, Runcorn is a seat you're definitely going to see a by-election. Labour have got a big majority there, but Reform will be snapping at those heels. But I think at 10 weeks, the chances of there not being a by-election are low. It might explain why Labour are so keen on abolishing short prison sentences at the moment.
Well, indeed. I mean, again, it's untenable. Even if you voted for the guy of that constituency, you go, right, this guy, you're behind bars for assault. There's no way in the world.
And of course, he used his MP title in the assault. He said, you won't mess around with your MP again, won't you? That just makes it such a workplace issue as well. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I wonder what Elon Musk would have written to him. What did you do at work last week? Anyway, 12:35 is the time. It is now time to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning £25,000.
It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
This is Talk. Welcome back. Good luck with that prize competition. Up next, we are going to take a quick break, and then we're going to be talking about the thought police turning up on yet another woman's doorstep over a Facebook post, and also why are fewer benefits claimants who refuse to take a job being sanctioned. I thought we were going to get those people back to work. That's up next with a former Labour Special Advisor. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Welcome back. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam Armstrong is still with us as well. And let's welcome a former Labour Special Advisor, Paul Richards, to the show once again. A good afternoon to you, Paul.
Good afternoon.
Thanks for joining us. Lots to talk about. Let's get straight to it. Let's talk about the thought police. I'm hoping you're as worried about this as I am. But Manchester police have been criticised for shameful behaviour after Helen Jones, who's a grandma, was caught. Well, basically, she basically opened her door to find two police officers from Manchester police visiting her because she had written a Facebook post criticising Labour politicians. We all, of course, remember the rather bizarre situation of that WhatsApp group involving Labour politicians, one of whom lost his job in the government, and various local Labour councillors making some rather, should we say, some would say inappropriate, and some would say offensive jokes. Now, I'm of the view that WhatsApp messages should be kept private. I don't think people should be punished for them. But she wrote a comment, nothing abusive, not inciting violence, nothing like that. Two police officers turn up her door because she's criticised the local Labour councillors for being in that group. What does that tell us about Starmer's Britain?
I don't think it tells us anything about Starmer's Britain. I mean, my instinct is always to back the police, and I think that, instinctively, my first call when the news broke was, I'm sure they've got a good reason to do this. There must be something in the messaging which involves a bomb threat or a threat to murder somebody.
Well, there wasn't.
But this is the I'm about to pivot onto that, Julia, which is that it now appears that it was not benign, but certainly not threatening language.
What do you mean, not benign?
Well, I mean, it was language that, you should expect in public life if you are a councillor. And therefore, I'm a bit concerned now that I think the police have wasted everyone's time. And the question mark now is who made the complaint and, why did they go to the police with this? It might well be that they are wasting police time too. So there needs to be an investigation. I don't know. I've not seen anywhere what she actually said.
I can read you.
Are saying there wasn't a crime.
I can read you in one post. She wrote, let's hope he does a decent thing and resigns. Somehow think his ego won't allow it. This was about a local councillor. She said, not looking good for Councillor Sedgwick. And someone said, will you be resigning to him? I mean, they're all along those lines. Yeah. Nothing abusive, nothing like. So, I mean, why on earth would police think they should turn up to that? Now, we had these things last summer. We had it after the Southport attacks, and there was some very, very, very unpleasant and clearly criminal messages that were posted online where people were inciting violence, calling for people to go to this hostel where asylum seekers are, set them on fire. Absolutely unacceptable, of course. But we also had people who were just expressing their opinion and not doing any and they were also facing the police turning up. But this is massive overreach. Someone calling for a councillor to resign because they've been in a WhatsApp group that's supposedly so awful that a government minister has had to lose his job. I mean,
I think the issue here is, though, that the police need to look into this, and it looks like a misdirection of resources.
No, they don't need to look into this.
Well, they do need to look into it because we need to know what the threshold was that meant that the two officers were deployed in this way, and that seems, on the face value, to have been a waste of police time, like I say. But the police should not now be open to the kind of criticism that they are the Stasi. This is the thought police. Their faces are all over the Daily Mail and other newspapers now, so those two officers can't behave. And I'm always going to back the police in this situation.
Why?
They must have felt at the time, because we should back the police.
Why?
And because at the time it would look like they had some threshold had been crossed whereby they should have...
No, but they didn't turn up saying, someone's told us that you've written some messages. They would have looked... I mean, if you're going over to interview a woman about her messages saying that she believes she's committed a crime... I mean, non-crime hate incident, by definition, not a crime, shouldn't be involved in it. So they would know what the messages were. Why did those police officers think that what she'd written was a crime when it's been established right now, she's not facing any charges, it wasn't a crime? So why are they wasting that time? Because, I mean, look, you know, people report a burglary and no one turns up. Girls are gang raped and groomed, no one turns up. Why are they turning up? Because some woman's written something on Facebook about a local Labour councillor.
Which is why I say the police do need to investigate what went wrong here, because it looks like there's been a misuse of police time. It looks like someone has complained and that they've gone to this door, but they shouldn't have. But to, blacken all of the police as being the Stasi.
But I haven't used the word Stasi. B, I'm not blacking all police. Most police officers I know are horrified by stuff like that. They're all desperate. They're literally counting down the months and the years till they can retire, get their pension and get out, because they know that that's the sort of stuff they get sent to do. Those officers didn't do this of their own volition. Someone would have sent them.
Which is why we need to know that. But you did use the word criminal earlier. There are things you can say online that are criminal, and the internet is not an ungoverned space. You can't just do and say anything you like.
But we've already established that what she did wasn't criminal, because otherwise she'd have been arrested.
Which is why the police need to look at it.
I genuinely, I love your faith in the police. I suppose you're also got a lot of faith in the government's having this counter disinformation unit, which we heard about in the papers yesterday. As someone who had a file on them kept by the last counter disinformation unit simply for criticising the government's COVID policy, along with people like Carl Hennigan, my last guest, and others. I'm sure you've got a lot of faith in government and all authority, because I used to have a lot of faith in this stuff, Paul. I don't anymore, because it's been proven that they are not trustworthy.
I think you do need to monitor what goes online, because we know a lot of the hateful language becomes violent acts in real life. I mean,
no, we don't. That's not true. That's simply not true. That's not backed up by the facts at all.
You this morning have been talking about the threat from Islamofascism and the rise of Islamism, and people being radicalised online. And this happens in these spaces, and we do need to monitor it.
Well, it happens on the streets of London every 2 weeks, and police don't do anything about that, do they?
We do need to monitor what goes online. We also need to police those demos, by the way, which I'm pretty sick of having to try and get through London through people shouting and blocking up the streets. But that's a different...
Well, I'm not so bothered about the traffic as I am by the Islamofascists on the streets, but there we are.
There are laws, though, that we do need to apply to the internet, just as we do to the street, because it's not an ungoverned space. Okay. And what goes on in the internet is subject to the criminal law.
Let me begin. Wasn't criminal. Okay, can I also ask you about, just one more question, I want to ask you about the benefits claimants, because according to the latest research, fewer rather than more benefit claimants who refuse to accept a job are actually being sanctioned by the benefits agencies, despite a promise by the Work and Pensions Secretary Liz Kendall that she's going to crack down on worklessness. So how is that explained? And why is anybody who refused to take a job not instantly sanctioned? Full stop. You're done.
Well, Liz Kendall has said that she believes a lot of people are taking the mickey, her phrase, and that the department is going to start cracking down on this, because I think that's absolutely right. Nobody should be not working if they can, and nobody should be taking the mickey by taking benefits to which they are not entitled.
Well, then why are more people not being sanctioned?
And if people need help to get into jobs, then I think the state has a duty to actually help people as well. It's not just sanctions, but it's also a bit of support, because there are people who could work that don't. Because of whatever reason.
Why are there fewer people being sanctioned, fewer claimants? So 117,000 out of 2.1 million people had their benefits docked in November 2024. That's down 20,000 on the number of people sanctioned a year earlier. I mean, I would still say not enough, but why is it going down if there's a crackdown?
I think those figures are worrying. I think ministers are going to look at those and do something about it, because the government does want to crack down on this issue. You know, they're on your side on this. I think we can't just waste money on people that are getting benefits who shouldn't be. And everyone needs to work if they can. People watching this need to be at work if they can.
Well, like you and I are, indeed. Really appreciate you joining us. Paul Richards, former Labour Special Advisor, thank you for that. Sam Armstrong, I want to come back to you just really briefly on the case of the Manchester grandmother. I'm touched by Paul Richards' faith in the authorities. I no longer have any faith in any of the authorities anymore. Not individual police officers, but I mean, just in terms of the whole system. But, you know, you were with the Free Speech Union for many years. Yeah, look, no faith in them. They have been completely and utterly captured. These police officers went there not to investigate an offence, but to give, quote-unquote, words of guidance. Yeah, I'm sorry, that's not your job. I've said they'd get 2 fingers up from me if they were going to give me guidance. It's not your job to do that. But, look, I think there is something deeply sinister going on with this government. Seems incapable of withstanding basic dissent. I'm sorry to compare the two cases, but we've just seen a Labour MP that's been sent to prison because a constituent went up and challenged him about what he was doing in the local town. Yeah. How did he respond? Knocking him out. We've seen time and time again that people are posting stuff on the internet rightly critical of this government, are getting their collars felt. Yeah. We saw two-tier justice, and I'm afraid there's no doubt about that in my mind, during the aftermath of the Southport thing, in which people who said the truth were arrested, in some cases convicted of offences for saying it was linked to terrorism. It was. Yeah. This Labour government have completely and utterly captured the police, I'm sorry to put it this highly, and are using it to clamp down on anyone who stands up to them. Yeah, I mean, I just think it's so sinister. I don't know how anyone can't see that. But there we are. 12:48 is the time. Up next, we are going to be talking about whether or not BBC licence fee cash was actually given to Hamas after an outrageous documentary featured a Hamas official's son and pretended he wasn't. What is the BBC up to? We'll talk to Jake Wallace-Simons about that up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam Armstrong still with me as well. Let's talk about what's going on in the Middle East right now. Jake Wallace-Simons is author of Israelophobia, the newest version of the oldest hatred and what to do about it. He's also a columnist at The Telegraph. Good afternoon to you, Jake.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Jade. I want to talk actually about what's going on in the Middle East, but also what's going on back here at the BBC as well. But just first up, just breaking news in the last hour or so, Israel has informed mediators they will release the 620 Palestinian prisoners whose release was delayed in exchange for the return of 4 hostages today, on condition we've got no more of these horrific propaganda ceremonies like the one staged at the weekend, just for the weekend, the release of the Bibas family and Oded Litchfield. I have to say, I was so horrified by that, and the fact that, you know, the mother's body wasn't released, the coffins were locked, no key provided, Hamas propaganda inside, lies, of course, imagine that from terrorists about how the children would have died. How has this been allowed to go on so long, and why has the Red Cross been participating in these horrific ceremonies?
I've been asking myself that same question over the past few weeks. The Red Cross, they're supposed to abide by the Geneva Convention. In fact, they were created as part of the Geneva Convention. The Geneva Convention explicitly prohibits the humiliation and degradation of prisoners of war. Now, these hostages are not prisoners of war. Let's get that straight. But nonetheless, you'd have thought the Red Cross would have, something in their minds would have twigged and thought it's not appropriate for our officials to take part in these signing ceremonies. And to make matters worse, it emerged just a few days ago that in a further act of depravity, Hamas brought hostages that it had underground to come and watch the handover ceremony and then be taken back into captivity as a kind of...
After begging for their own release.
Whilst begging for their own release. And those hostages were in a car that was literally about 10 or 15 feet from the Red Cross vehicles. Did the Red Cross have no idea that they were there? I don't know. I mean, these are questions which the Red Cross should really be called to account to answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, all these international agencies like the Red Cross, when they condemn anything, they always say, oh, atrocities or bad behaviour on both sides. It's always on both sides. And the equivocation over prisoners and hostages, when you're equivocating between some of the Palestinian prisoners who've been freed from Israeli prisoners, people who've committed mass murder, comparing them with, a toddler and a baby who have, according to Israeli pathologists, basically, been murdered. I mean, it is just in an underground tunnel. It is just extraordinary that they've done that. But of course, the worst offender on this is, of course, our own lovable Auntie Beeb, the BBC. Let's talk about this, because Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, has actually mentioned this as well. She wants to know if BBC licence fee cash has been given to Hamas terrorists during the making of a controversial BBC documentary. And I was reading about this, I was away last week, and I wasn't even surprised, because we know again and again people like this man who's found, discovered all this stuff, David Collier, that actually again and again the BBC is using reporters, it's using sources, it's quoting people again and again who have got clear pro-Hamas, not pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas, anti-Israel bias, celebrating October the 7th even, but treating them as if they are sort of, unbiased operators. Tell us what this documentary featured and tell us what the problem is with it.
Well, this was, the BBC has been accused of being a Hamas mouthpiece quite a lot over the past year and a half. But that's always been a kind of metaphor, whereas now it seems to be almost explicit, explicitly literally true. And the BBC employed a cameraman who'd expressed delight at October the 7th massacres and had created a documentary involving 3 children lamenting the war in Gaza and the evil Zionist regime and how it had it engaged in such genocides in Gaza. But all of those 3 children were linked in some way to Hamas. One was the son of a Hamas minister, the other was related, her brother, I think, was a Hamas police officer, and a third had posed with a headband and a Hamas gun with Hamas terrorists. The whole thing was a stitch-up. And if you watch the documentary, as I did, I'm afraid, you can see that it's propaganda. It doesn't feature a single jihadi. There's not a single gun. It seems as if Israel is conducting a war on civilians rather than fighting Hamas. And it's got some laughable inconsistencies. For example, at one point, the narrator says, oh, it's difficult to find drinking water in Gaza, clean drinking water. At the same time, in the background, you can see stalls selling drinking water and food and provisions and clothes. And then it goes to an interview with a young girl who's a content creator creating cooking programs online for followers. And then she goes shopping in an abundantly stocked grocery shop. And the whole thing is obviously propaganda. And it really hammers home for me this point, which I think cannot be repeated enough. Hamas controls all of the footage and reporting that comes out of Gaza. Viewers should ask themselves, why have you never seen a single bit of footage of a dead or wounded Hamas fighter, but only dead and wounded Palestinian civilians? The reason is that everything that comes out of Gaza is edited and censored by Hamas. By rights, every single news organisation, before it shows any footage from Gaza, should have a health warning saying this footage has been censored by Hamas.
But the BBC will and Sky News, they'll always say, you know, we've not been allowed to have a reporter. Israel banned us from having, you know, having reporters on the scene in Gaza during the war. But they'll point that out, but not point out the other obvious. I remember something else from the documentary. There's one of the children who's featured has different haircuts. I mean, you know, on the same day, and he's filmed. You know, he's helping out with the people who've been, you know, injured and getting them into hospital. He's a little lad, and he's running in. He's got Crocs on in one. He's got trainers on another. He's got flip flops on another. Supposedly, by the way, this was just filmed. You know, this was over a 2-hour period. The kid, I mean, goodness me, the kid has no problem finding a change of clothes or footwear, and even he grew his hair miraculously and then cut it again miraculously during the footage. But this thing, how did no one at the BBC notice this? Because you've had a dodgy cameraman, you've had a dodgy editor or reporter or whatever. How did no one seen at the BBC not look at this and go, given the criticism that people like you and me have been making rightly about them, and not go, hold on a minute, this is not reporting, this is not news, this is propaganda.
Well, obviously it's bad journalism and it's confirmation bias. You know, the BBC, people working at the BBC expect to see poor old suffering civilians in Gaza and all the blame lying with Israel. And when they're presented that by Hamas, they lap it up and think, OK, nothing to see here. Let's put that out to the world, to the millions of viewers that we have, without considering that what they're actually doing is taking Hamas propaganda and spreading it far and wide with the benefit of their platform. But I think that the really egregious moment came when this was pointed out to the BBC, because rather than saying, OK, this was an error, we'll try to apologise and correct it, pull the documentary immediately and then correct it, as any other journalist has done. You know, journalists make mistakes. That's what happens sometimes. Instead of doing that, they stood by it, defended it, and only pulled it when they were forced to do so. While it was on the internet that this was a Hamas propaganda show, it was still promoting it to the children of Newsround.
Don't even.
Still pushing it to its audiences.
Yes, it is just propaganda. It is just it really is outrageous. I mean, MPs are going to be questioning BBC bosses about this, but we know it's going to keep on happening. So appreciate you joining us as always, Jake Wallace-Simons. Thank you very much indeed. Quick word from you, Sam Armstrong, on this.
It outrages me how the left are really rightly quick to point out how people who are pushing these anti-Ukraine lines are getting their stuff from the Kremlin. But yet when we see these pro-Hamas lines pushed again and again and again, not one of them speaks out to the fact that these are being pushed by a deeply dangerous terrorist organisation determined to wipe out not just Jews but gay people and all of the rest of it. And there is silence. Total and utter silence.
Absolutely. It's just extraordinary. It really is, isn't it? Thank you so much, Sam. Thank you very much for joining us all this morning. Ian Collins is here now to tell us what's happening on his show.
Hello. I always wonder where you're going to make it back from the old trip on the mountains. And
they always mug me. I like my holidays.